Hey there, Milo, you gotta chill out, my little pug. Hey there, we're streaming now, you gotta chill out, my Milo pants. Chill out, little dog, you got a face that's just like a frog. You guys gotta see what I've been dealing with all day. My little guy is so happy when I get home. He is. He's unbelievably happy when I get home. Look at him. Look at him. He's just sits here, and no matter what I do, he just sits here and like stares at me. Right? He just sits there and stares at me like the cute little sweet little guy that he is. Yeah, he's a cute little guy. He's a cute little guy and we love him. Yeah, we do. But boy howdy, sometimes I'm like just like looking up the news or like typing something in and trying to get some writing done, and he's just like, Jonathan, you could play with me, Jonathan. You could be playing with me right now, you know, Jonathan. If you played with me right now, Jonathan, I'd be ever so grateful. For I am Milo T. Pants. Yes, king of all pugs. So, news on the Canadian commie front, personal news. I am going to be getting a roommate. This is really, really good news for me because it means that my rent will be cut in half. That is a super big deal for anybody out there who is paying rent. Anybody out there who's been living alone or living in a situation where they have been paying a lot of rent, to have your rent halved. I think you will understand what that means. So I'm actually over the moon about it. It means that I get a little bit of money to... I'm going to get a gym membership, right? It means I'll actually be able to go to the gym. It means I'll actually be able to buy decent food in order to support that decision, going to the gym. It means that I'll be able to buy a guitar, buy a new guitar. As much as I love this guitar that I have, it's actually quite difficult to play, and it doesn't hold its tune anymore, right? So literally every time I play it, I have to retune it. And then on top of that, it's actually gotten quite difficult to play, because it always was a difficult guitar to play, but I was young. And now I'm old, and my hands hurt when I play it. So I'm like, so all of a sudden I've been this guy that's just been counting his pennies, and it's just gonna stop, and I'm kind of over the moon about it, and it gets me thinking about how absolutely stupid it is we've done this to ourselves as a people. We've done this. We've made a decision as a people to ensure that huge swaths of the society are living in this kind of state of frantic poverty. And now that I am like just on the threshold of not even getting out of like poverty, like not even getting out of just like not having any money, but just getting out of this like threadbare, barely making it kind of situation into something a little bit more reasonable. And just the idea that like why are we permitting this? Why are we permitting this in our society? Why are we permitting people to tolerate? Like, why are we tolerating this? We call ourselves one of the wealthiest countries in the world. We consider ourselves to be rich. All of these capitalists are walking around talking about how great capitalism is and how much money everybody's making, and corporate executives are bragging about how much money they're making. Meanwhile, upwards of half the society, 50% of people are saying that they're $200 away, $300 away from insolvency. And we tolerate this. Like, we tolerate this. We're not actively saying to our political class, like, give me one reason why I shouldn't just vote for the guy with the boot on his head. You know? And now that I'm on this sort of threshold of walking into like a new financial reality for myself personally, because I'm making a sacrifice in my life. I no longer get to live alone, right? That I now live with a roommate. Right? So that's a personal sacrifice that I'm taking on for myself because the society demands it must be so. And if I don't do that, then I just continue kind of wallowing in this subsistence sort of life. And it's
And this is the great capitalism. This is the great solution that capitalism has for it. Meanwhile, massive amounts of apartments sitting empty, massive amount of investment properties just being bought up by BlackRock and these giant conglomerate corporations. Like, it's stupid, and it just feels like I can no longer take the people of this society seriously. And this unseriousness, this very dim-witted way of existing and being in the world is persisting into the most serious stuff that exists in the world, right? We are going to be talking quite a bit today about the ongoing genocide in Israel. Like, partially because we here in Canada are funding it, right? That we are actually in support as Canadians of Israel. And the thing that has happened, and the transition that's happened in the last week, the shift that's occurred, near as I can tell, that is definitely worth noting and definitely worth talking about, is that the both sides narrative has disappeared. That it is no longer the case that liberals, well, conservatives never did, but liberals did say, well, it's a both sides issue, and both groups are, there's trouble on both sides, and it's a conflict between two groups. That's gone away. That's gone away now. That it is only support Israel or be deemed a terrorist. That we quite literally and quite straightforwardly have the White House comparing anti-Israel protesters, people who are going out calling for a ceasefire. Jews say ceasefire now, calling for a ceasefire in Gaza, coming out in support of Palestine, comparing them to literal white supremacist groups and neo-Nazi groups. That we are seeing legislation tabled by the Biden administration. Biden administration unveils new actions to combat anti-Semitism on college campuses. The implications of this article are pretty grim. It sounds like Biden is going to use Title VII to pull funding from colleges who don't stop pro-Palestinian protesters, which means colleges will crack down on protesters and ask cops to crack down as well. It's a very serious situation. It's a very dramatic situation that the society has very clearly taken an extremely far-right turn. And we are more or less just left in the lurch. We're just left here to deal with a society that here in Canada honors Nazis in Parliament, but is now just openly supporting and openly moving in favor of what I describe to be a Nazi-style administration that is running as a Nazi organization. Look at Dizzy, good to see you. Isaac, good to see you. Jimmy Dore said that Biden is doing everything he said Trump would do. Yeah, of course. Like, you know my position, right? I say it all the time. They are the same, right? That the Democrats and the Republicans are allies. That Democrats are simply better at playing this game of statesmanship. That they end up looking better. They end up with better PR. They typically end up with more media presence that is more favorable to them in the society, right? That's definitely true. Mikhail, good to see you. You think about someone like Bill Clinton, right? Bill Clinton was a disaster for America across the board, right? His foreign policy was a disaster. His home economic, his domestic policies were a disaster. He was easily one of the most disastrous presidents in modern history, but he got to play saxophone and get called America's first black president and all this kind of, colloquial nonsense. And like the thing that everybody was like aghast by wasn't the fact that he was like bombing innocent children and removing welfare from black neighborhoods. No, it was that he had sex with an intern. That's what really matters. These are the things that really matters. So America just has the most screwed up priorities a nation could possibly have, and it's starting to blow back on them with this situation that's happening in Israel now. That the situation that's unfolding in Israel, I've said it several times now, and I think it's absolutely the case and absolutely true, is that the empire knows that the youth of America, that the youth of the West, are no longer supporting Israel. Like, the mask has come off. Israel is a Nazi state, a Zionist state. That Zionism and Nazism are equivalents. That the grift that the Zionists have been playing, where they're pretending to be Jews and they're pretending to care about Allah or care about any of this stuff, that grift is over. Nobody believes that anymore. If you're under the age of 30, you don't believe that. It's obvious who the aggressor is. It's obvious who the aggressor is in the situation. The narrative that is saying that the Israelis are just defending themselves is comical. You've got to be absolutely brain dead to actually hold on to this belief. You've got to actually shut your brain off, know nothing about history, know nothing about the basic facts of the situation, and just buy into some of the most delusional, deranged shit you've ever heard of in your life. Like, you literally need to buy into people's arguments like, well, 3,000 years ago, the Jews were there. Okay, like, under that reasoning, anybody can basically go anywhere they like and throw any family they want into the street and say, my family used to live here. Like, I could go back to Ireland and throw families out of their house and say, my family used to live here, 400 years ago. Right, the Sanderson tribe used to live here, so I'm gonna throw. Exactly, Isaac. You're right. History started October 7th. That's right, Isaac. Yeah, thank you for reminding us, in fact, Isaac, that history began not a moment sooner than October 7th. That there is no history. Certainly there is no history of the British Mandate. There's no history of rounding up 750,000 Palestinian people, right? There's no history of constant extermination campaigns, constant relocation campaigns. This is not a systemic extermination, because history began October 7th, and the Palestinians always lived in the Gaza Strip, right? So the shame that Canada bears through all of this, and Canada does bear quite a bit of shame, continues. Canadian Special Forces members on the ground in Israel, DND confirms. It's heartbreaking. It's difficult to live in a society that has gone full-blown Zionist. I'm going to stop saying Nazi, because I've been saying it in order to land the point, but I feel like my listenership, the people who are listening to me, understand what I mean when I say Zionist, and so I'm going to keep saying that, with the understanding that Zionism is Nazism, that they are equivalents to one another. They operate the same, they act the same, and in my view, they are the same. Yep. Well, of course. Isaac writes, Bernie Sanders says Israel has the right to defend itself. What have I always said about Bernie Sanders? What have I said about AOC? What have I said about these people? Right? They are playing WWE characters, right? That their role in the drama called American politics, that we all pretend is real, is to play the hero, right? That's their job. That Bernie Sanders' job is to stand up and give people something to invest the energy back into the system. Not everyone can be a heel, right? Not everyone can be a heel in the narrative. Not because if everybody is a heel, then the populace might actually get behind a real, actual hero. And so the system needs heroes. And that's where the Democrats have typically stepped in. That the Democrats play the grift, their character is the character of the hero. They are not, obviously. They are the good cops in the good cop, bad cop arrangement. But that's the role that they play. And this situation with Israel has revealed Bernie Sanders for what he is, right? Which is just another grifter. And his grift is, well, everybody needs free healthcare. Other countries have free healthcare. Everybody pay attention to me while I talk loudly about healthcare and how everybody needs to get healthcare, knowing full well that that's never going to happen because my job is to ensure that you don't get it. That's my whole job. But my job is also to make sure that you invest in a dead system that has died years ago, that doesn't actually function and will never function. That the system of American politics is a dead, calcified corpse that has already been mummified and has been put into a tomb and has been buried and long dead forever and ever. But it still needs worship. It still needs people to invest their lives into it. Because if everybody suddenly realized that, oh, this thing is totally dead and has been dead for years and years and years and doesn't respond to the populace and is in fact just this fake, phony system and looked at one another and said, well, then let's just operate that way. Let's just operate as though it's an evil external force that we don't actually need to pay any attention to whatsoever, outside of the fact that sometimes it rolls in with guns, right? Sometimes it comes in with guns. Oh, wow. Someone's raiding my Twitch chat with a party of 39. Hello to all of you fellas. I hope you're all doing well out there. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're all doing well out there. We are talking about the ongoing genocide in Israel and how obvious it's gotten and how terrifying it is that our country, America and Canada, are taking a far-right fascist turn into Zionism, which I consider to be the same as Nazism. That's the problem. Ignorance was rampant. Land grabs, basic facts of life in the Old Testament. Well, I mean, when there's like 50 people in the world. Like, you walk onto a parcel of land and there is literally no one there. You know, when you're in the Old Testament, although there's plenty of situations, like the entire book of Joshua is them literally walking through and purging the land. Like, yeah, they came, killed everyone, took their land. Yeah, that's the book of Joshua. Yeah, even Moses has some of that. Like, Moses ushers them into the land of milk and honey, and what is that? It's a land full of Canaanites, right? And Joshua goes through and cleanses the land of Canaanites. And the book is very clear that it's like, these people were no good. They were bad people. But, like, because the Jews were better in the book. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Yeah, no to CIA spooks. Yes to ghost spooks. Happy Halloween. Now depress me, John. Well, I'm not here to depress you. I'm here to acknowledge the depression that exists within you in a hope that you will find catharsis and a way through it. Right? That's what it's about. That unsung depression can live inside of your heart and live inside of your soul. But coming together and expressing that and expressing our anxieties and fears and depression hopefully leads us to a catharsis moment. Nazi is a Zionist coined term, after all, is it? How interesting. Does Canada allow to say that out loud here in Europe? Yep, it's becoming illegal to support Palestinian civilians. Yeah, I've got a couple articles about exactly that, where, these are hate marches, says the Home Secretary hits out at pro-Palestinian protests as UK terror threat remains substantial. If you walk around in the streets of London with a Palestinian flag over your shoulders, you get arrested. We've seen the video, we've seen the evidence, and they've said so out loud, right? The Prime Minister of Britain has said so. Like, it's zero tolerance approach to anti-Semitism, because what they've done, of course, is, again, and the Biden administration is doing the same thing, is they are conflating Zionism with Judaism, which is itself, by the way, incidentally, anti-Semitic. Right? By accusing others of anti-Semitism, they are in fact guilty of anti-Semitism. We are standing up and saying Zionists are not followers of Judaism, that they are distinct from Jews and Israelis, and we are criticizing Zionists in the same way that if we say we are criticizing Nazis, that is not a critique of Germans, right? And then they turn around and call us anti-Semites. So it's an act of anti-Semitism, is what they are doing, because every single Jew is the same. right? That's their argument. That every single Jew in every single configuration, no matter what they say, do, or argue, is the same, because all Jews are the same. That's the most anti-Semitic shit I've ever heard of in my life. And that's their argument. That you can't actually say, no, Zionism is a distinct ideology, has its own distinct features and its own distinct form. And we should be able to discuss what that is and what they stand for. And we should be able to find Israelis and Jews who stand against Zionism, which we can, and we do, right? And then if you stand up and obliterate all of that and say that you're being anti-Semitic, well, the real anti-Semite in the conversation is the one that wants to obliterate distinctions between ethnic groups. Yeah, Zionism is a religion. The state of Israel is its God. I've heard that. By the way, how did we all end here? I don't know, dude. Good question. I was just born here. I was just born here, my man. We're all sort of just dealing with the reality of being alive, right? And one would hope that the first thing that we would attempt to do while dealing with the reality of being alive is just sort of assume that the places we were born are more or less just like safe spaces where we can interact with one another. It's not turning out to be the case. Isaac writes, "He gave you houses full of good things. He will give you wells that you did not dig. He will give you vineyards and olive trees that you did not plant, and you will have plenty to eat." Deuteronomy 6:11. Yeah. No, man, like the Old Testament was like straight up. People who are holding up like the Torah and the Old Testament as like we need to follow this, like are fucking war criminals. Like that's what they want. They want to go into territory, steal people's lands, and take it, and then say God let them have it. Like it's brutal. It's just absolutely brutal what's going on. So we're living through this, and it's a very clarifying moment. It's a very clarifying moment what we're going through. I think that that's something that we all need to respect and understand. That the lines are being drawn in the sand. The masks are coming off. The culture is revealing itself to be extremely far right. Right? The culture is revealing itself to be extremely far right, if not overtly outright fascist, and is essentially saying out loud to everyone in front of all of us that it is completely acceptable for the West, for the white power structure, to go anywhere it likes, to purge any group it likes, and if people fight back against that, then they are the terrorists. That is currently the actual argument of the West. That it is completely legitimate for us to fund, organize, arm, and train Israelis, Jews, and Zionists to go into a region, Israel, seize the land, take the territory, and commit a genocide against the people there. And if they fight back, they are the terrorists. And should people in the heart of the country actually do things like occupying 17 MPs' offices and read the names of dead Palestinian children, then they are the terrorists, right? That the position of both sides is gone, and the empire is taking off its mask and saying very clearly, no, this isn't a both sides issue. Support Israel or go to prison. And it's worse in Europe than it is over here, but it's coming. It's coming. Yeah. Now imagine hearing that as a 6-year-old. You would think, wow, God is powerful. Yeah. And like it turns out that what you considered as an act of God as a child was actually just your military, right? Turns out that if you give a bunch of people high grade weaponry and have them go against people who have sticks and stones, right? It's not much of a fight. It's not much of a fight, right? And we're all in this position. And the rest of the world is turning against the West. Like, Ukraine was a real starting point. Like, near as I can tell, the position of the rest of the world has always been, skeptical is a good word to use. Like post World War II, the United States comes out of that situation with an awful lot of power. And the rest of the world was always in a position where they felt they needed to deal with the United States, right? And you have to appease the monster as much as you possibly can. There's a lot of appeasement that happens post World War II. And the hope, I think, from the rest of the world was we will just appease the West, and that will lead them into kind of a place of complacency ultimately. They will ultimately come to see that our collective prosperity together as a world population is also beneficial for it. That sure, we here in China and Russia and Latin America and Africa, we will reach a certain amount of prosperity, and but that's okay because so too will the West. And as is normal, I think, like, and this is a major critique I have for most communist leaders and most communist leadership through time, is they misunderstand the psychopathic nature of the West. That the West does what it does because it's crazy, because it's insane, because it wants people to suffer. That inflicting suffering on others is part of the reason why it does the things it does. Sure, wealth, right? Sure, let's go steal all their gold. Sure, let's go steal all their oil. Like, sure, let's become rich together. Sure, as Americans. Right, as white Americans, we could be rich. Certainly not black Americans, certainly not Latino Americans. Those people do our service work for us. White Americans are supposed to do very well, so let's do that. But also to maximize the suffering, right? That's definitely part of it. Because how dare these non-white people actually view themselves as our peers or equals in any way or any regard, right? You have to explain how the U.S.-Canada does those things. Sorry, why it does those things. I think it's very, like, to me, it's fairly clear, right? That it is. So we here in the West have a religious ideology. That religious ideology is capitalism. There is a way to observe and talk about capitalism in a scientific way, but the people that do that are Marxists, right? That if you actually analyze and pay attention to capitalism through a scientific lens, using a system of historical material dialectics, right, then you're a Marxist, and you're no longer a capitalist. And as a Marxist, you understand that the purpose of an economic system and for analyzing an economic system is to ensure that everyone has access to their basic human rights, right? Everyone comes into this reality with the right to have access to food and shelter. That if somebody withholds food and shelter from you, they are the criminal. And everybody intrinsically understands that, right? That your creator has said to you, you require food and you require shelter, and you should be able to get that, right? There's food everywhere. There's shelter everywhere, right? And if somebody is to withhold that from you in order to enslave you into a system of wage slavery, as we do here in the West, then they are the criminals, and you don't need to follow their laws, right? There's no such thing as a law in the West. It doesn't exist, right? There are lots of threats, and there's a gang of people who will come into your house and beat the shit out of you for not listening to those threats. But there's no laws, right? You don't need to pay any attention to the laws. Like, it doesn't matter. So if you actually pay attention to the system of capital from a scientific lens, from a material historical position, then you're a Marxist, right? Capitalists, i.e. the defenders of capital, are following a religious ideology that has nothing to do with actually observing anything, that has anything to do with reality, right? And this has rendered them very dumb. It's made them quite silly, frankly. And they follow three pretty clear edicts, or what I call the three corners, the trifecta of the unholy trinity of the capitalist death cult is what I call it. And the first thing they worship is money, right? The first thing they worship is money. That money is their God, what they call the profit motive, right? Money is God. The person who has the most amount of money is the best person in the society. And it doesn't matter what they do or how they act or what justification they have for having that money or how they even got that money, right? They earned it. And it doesn't matter what they've done to get it, right? It doesn't matter if they've exploited an entire nation. It doesn't matter if their father was a literal slaver. It doesn't matter if their grandparents did a bunch of deals with the Nazis. It doesn't matter if they themselves own slaves and have them thrown into cobalt mines, right? They have money. They are good. And that's all it is. The person with the most money is the best. So worship of money, first and foremost. Then the second is the worship of the self. And these sort of reinforce each other, right? So you never care about anybody but yourself. And if you do care about anybody other than yourself, that's widely viewed as a weakness. That you are supposed to make decisions to benefit your position exclusively, and they say so, right? The entire system of what's called economics in the West, which is a religious ideology and a religious study exclusively, assumes that people are self-interested. And that the system of economics in the West organizes itself with this assumption that people are self-interested, in spite of all the evidence to the contrary, right? All of the millennia and millennia of human cooperation and the amount of volunteer work that happens in the society, the reason why people become, like many people join the medical profession is not exclusively for money, right? There is an aspect of helping the society that people actually care about, this idea of helping one another. But that's not how the system of capital works. It's the worship of the self exclusively. It's a very childish worldview. Basically, I'm the only thing that matters and the world exists for me exclusively. And if it doesn't benefit me, then it benefits nobody. And if it doesn't benefit me, then it's completely okay to destroy it, right? That if it's going to benefit somebody else, you can see this strategy, by the way, playing out throughout the Middle East right now. That if it benefits somebody else, but it doesn't benefit me, then you should destroy it, right? Because if it benefits them, but it doesn't benefit me, then that only makes them stronger. And my goal, of course, is to dominate them completely, because I'm the one that needs to be the king. I'm the best. Me. That's all that matters. So burn their crops if it doesn't feed you, because it weakens them. And then the third pillar of the whole thing is the worship of the hierarchy, right? The worship of the system itself. And so what you end up with is rich people who are very selfish, who ascend a hierarchy, who create a series of institutions within that hierarchy that you then worship. And so it doesn't matter what they say, you just say yes, because you're worshiping it, right? You're not actually interested in whether or not what they're saying is true or factual or accurate, right? You just say yes because that's what Daddy said. That and you'll note that this system is very childish. There's a very childish way of looking at the world that these people follow, because it's very paternalistic and it's very dim-witted, right? It requires no thought or real analysis. That you can just kind of go through life doing what Daddy told you and become a very rich person if you were born in the right circumstances. And then you can turn around and tell everybody how great you are, because that's part of worshiping the self, is telling everybody how great you are, even though you have almost no responsibility whatsoever for the position you were born into in the first place. Right? Like people like Elon Musk, who love to tell people how smart he is and loves to say all this kind of people like Jordan Peterson walking around being like, yeah, the people who ascend the hierarchy are the most competent. Certainly not the best positioned. Certainly not the people who are born into wealth, privilege, and prestige, right? Certainly not the people who have all of these advantages handed off to them, right? Who can sort of sidestep a lot of societal problems because their dad was rich and because their grandfather was rich, right? So certainly that doesn't play ever into the way that they think about things. And so why does the system act the way it does? Well, because it's primarily run by dim-witted, narcissistic psychopaths who see any success for anyone else as a direct threat to their own power and prestige. And so it must be destroyed, simply by the force of its existence, simply because it exists, right? That's the beating heart of everything you see in the world today, is that if it's not directly benefiting specifically the owners of the society, so it's not directly benefiting Bill Gates, Elon Musk, David Thompson here in Canada, if it's not directly benefiting them. And I don't mean like you've created an argument that has this circuitous sort of like, oh, you know, if you actually help the workers do this, then that will do this. Like the work from home situation is a perfect case in point, right? All of the studies have shown that working from home increases productivity. All of the studies have shown that this is the case. And the capitalists don't care. They want people back at the office. Why? Because this connection of, oh, well, workers stay home, that increases productivity, so that should increase profits, which is the point, is the whole idea, is the whole argument, right? That's an indirect route. There are steps in that thinking, right? And capitalists don't care about that. What the capitalist wants is he wants to walk onto a floor and he wants to see all his serfs, he wants to see his wage slaves, and he wants to go, yeah, good, I'm rich. Look at the influence I have in the society. Look at how many lives I can fuck with. Look at how much human capital I have. I can witness it. Here it is, right? And if somebody is to say to them, like, you know, you're losing a little bit of money through productivity, they'll say, then it's worth the cost. Then I'll pay it, right? Because it's worth seeing my cattle and having the influence and spreading the misery and spreading my influence amongst them and letting them know that they're owned and that they have a boss, right? That's the point. The point is not necessarily like it's to conflate themselves. It's to increase their own sense of their own ego and their own self-worth. And that's essentially capitalism as a religious ideology as it's spread into the world, that don't allow the Middle East to develop because that might increase the power of China. Don't let Iran, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, don't allow them to become suitable trading partners to Russia and China. Go in there and destroy it. Steal their oil if you have to, right? That's how the United States is operating, and the rest of the world is onto it now. That post World War II, the rest of the world needed to go into a pattern of appeasement to appease this psychopath that clearly exists in the society. But as they have raised their own profile and raised their own military and raised their own ability to defend themselves against the psychopathic empire, they've sort of hoped, and I think this was the case through like the 70s and 80s and maybe even into the 90s, they sort of hoped that the United States was going to become kind of, what's the word to use? Sort of benign. Like, sure, the United States invades Iraq, right? But like, the Middle East is fucked up. Like, the Middle East is completely fucked up and everybody knows it. That people in China and people in Russia and people in South America and Africa are like, yeah, war in the Middle East, right? Nothing new there. It's war for, like, it's just crazy war-torn places all the time, constantly. It's happening constantly in the Middle East. And so it's not insane. And there's a logic, right? People can respect, leadership can respect, oh, the United States went in there to steal oil. It's a resource war. Okay, well, you know, it's scummy, it's shitty, sure, but it makes a type of sense, right? It's evil, right? It's obliquely evil, but it makes a type of sense. Yeah, they went into Iraq to steal their oil. Yeah, makes a type of sense. Oh, they're disrupting the Venezuelan economy for oil. Like, yeah, it makes a completely, like, going in and destroying a place and stealing their resources at least has a logic to it. What they've started to do in Ukraine, what they're doing in Israel, is madness. It's not a type of madness. It's madness. It's a psychopathic demon squalling as its strategy is beginning to fail. That its strategy of invading other regions and blowing them up and stealing their resources is failing because it's costing them more to do it than it is to get the resources out. And when they do get the resources out and when they do get the stuff out, they're not distributing it domestically. And so the entire population of their own countries are falling into revolt and rebellion the entire society is fracturing. So the system is attempting to defend itself through distraction primarily, and people are beginning to see through it. And so the whole thing is sort of falling apart for these guys, and their only strategy that they actually have left in order to try to secure their position of prestige is to use the only tool they've ever funded, which is their military. That's it. That if all you have is a hammer, then everything is a nail, right? That's it. And the only way that you can solve any problem is by trying to drive it in like it's a nail. Well, it's not going to work. It's not going to work, and the rest of the world sees it. The rest of the world sees it very clearly, which is why the rest of the world is trying to isolate the United States and will be successful in that regard. And so the United States is squalling around like a wounded animal, trying to find a foothold to subserviate the non-white populations of the world, right? That the Chinese were allowed to not be carpet bombed the way Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia have been carpet bombed, because China subserviated itself. China said to the United States, "We'll go to work for you. Bring your factories over here. We'll do all your shit for you." Right? You don't need to have those. And cheap labor, cheap wages. Right? You don't need to do any of that. Right? You can bring it all over here. We'll do all your work for you, and then you can distribute it into your society domestically. Right? So the United States went, "Oh, what a great deal. We won't carpet bomb you the way that we've been carpet bombing Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, and Korea, right? We won't absolutely decimate 20% of your population and turn all of your cities into rubble the way that we've done to the rest of those, right? We'll leave you alone because you're now subservient to us." Well, now China's not subservient to the United States, and it's making it very clear that it's not subservient to the United States and that it operates for its own benefit because it took all of the wealth that it generated through that period of time, and it helped its own citizens and spread it domestically, right? Spread it domestically. What are you guys even saying? Here we have a U.S. imperialist supporter of a distorted idea that USA only kills the bad guy. Hilarious. Anybody in the chat that is actually saying that the United States only kills bad guys is likely a white supremacist. Like, it's a very white supremacist way to view the world. That we have the right to go into countries and blow them up because they are quote-unquote bad guys. When the truth is that, like, you can always find a reason. There's always a reason, right? Not that the United States is trying to do that anymore, right? Not that they care to find reasons anymore. Like literally their reasons for fucking around in Ukraine were straight up just bald, naked imperialism, right? They didn't create a casus belli. They don't have a casus belli for being in Ukraine at all. It's straight up just, well, that's not blue. This little section of the map should be blue, and it's not. It's not blue, but it's not red either, so it should be blue. We're going to make it blue. And the red guys are like, dude, don't make that blue. Like, that's scary as shit for us, right? If you make that blue, then you can take all of your fucking missiles and put them right on my border and point them right at my capital city. No. I consider that an act of war, and I will fight against that. Nah, we're going to turn it blue. We're going to make that go blue. In fact, here's a coup. Like, that's nuts. That's some insane shit. Like, now the United States is no longer just, like, meddling in a defenseless nation in order to enslave their population and force them into plantations and shit, which is what it usually does. Now it's dicking around with nuclear superpowers. Now it's actually dabbling in the real idea that it can balkanize Russia, right? Like, that's nuts. That's insane. You don't want to live in a world where Russia has balkanized. You don't want to live in that world. Right? You don't want to live in a world where a major federated nuclear power has suddenly broken apart and that it's turned into what, like, state-run warlords? Like, can you imagine one of these, like, crazy mercenaries suddenly seizing control of a state and having access to nuclear weapons? Like, this is essentially what the United States is fighting for, and it's madness. It's insane. Like it is almost as though they are, like, attempting to open up a hellgate and usher in a dark age of demonism. Like, it's that kind of deep, dark evil that they're attempting to do. If they're taking down regimes like Saddam's, since I want to live in a world with no more dictators, don't you? They funded Saddam. Like, it's such a dim-witted way to look at the world. Like, just disconnect from reality completely. The CIA funded and armed and trained Saddam Hussein. What are you talking about? Like, if you want less dictators in the world, then you should stop funding them, right? You should stop arming them, right? It's really real. Wouldn't that make their invasion morally justified? No. No, bro. You don't get to kill 1 million Iraqi civilians because you trained a dictator. Like, yikes. How about, crazy thought, just thinking out loud, how about you leave these people fucking alone? How about that? That's a nuts idea, eh? Just leave people alone, right? Maybe talk to them and be like, hey, we've got business ideas. Hey, we can't help but notice that you've got a lithium mine over there we'd love to have access to. Can we help you build some infrastructure so that we can get in there and get access to your resources? No? Oh, I guess we'll go in there and slaughter your citizens and steal your land and erect a dictator and then claim that it was justified because you had a dictator. Like, this is you. This is what you sound like. It's unbelievable. We have a real smart guy in my chat in YouTube saying, ha-ho. He hi ha ho. Nice name, dude. Actually, I really like this name. He hi ha ho. That's fun to say. Communism has never worked, except it has every single time it's been tried. Why would the United States carpet bomb countries? Why would the United States fund far right militant groups? Why would the United States fund enormous organizational power against communist countries? If the system just didn't work, right? If communism just fails, right? If communism just doesn't work, then why would anybody do anything other than just look at it in a bemused sort of way when people try it and go, those silly people, don't they know, right? Don't they know that communism doesn't work? And why wouldn't they just say to that country, look, we all know communism doesn't work, right? Why did the USSR fall? The USSR didn't fall. Right? The project of communism didn't fail, it was abandoned. And it was abandoned for a very clear reason, which is that the Nazis went in there and killed 25 million people, and the Russians thought to themselves, that was horrible, when the capitalist nation of Germany, with its fascist leader Adolf Hitler, invaded our country and murdered 25 million of our citizens. And we were able to defeat the capitalists then, but we don't want them to attack again. Why did they attack? Because we were antagonizing them. We were saying, we've got a better system, we've got a better way of doing it, we're going to antagonize you, and it led to the death of 25 million citizens. And so you know what we're going to do? Not antagonize them anymore. We're going to follow a policy of appeasement. We're going to say to the West, we don't want to fight you. We want to be your friends. We want to ally with you. And the period of time from Khrushchev all the way up to Putin himself, the strategy of the ruling class was a strategy of appeasement in order to send an olive branch over to the West and say, we are trying to rectify this situation so that you won't send an army over here and murder 25 million of our citizens again. Right? Like, World War II happened. I know that people think that history started on October 7th, right? I know that people think that, like, history started this morning, right? And what their dad told them about communism is what happened, right? Nationalism is better than oh, so you're just a Nazi. Like, we're good, right? We just got a nationalist, at least, in the chat, right? So do you think there's a sub-race that should be rounded up, right? Mucho Chile, talking about lithium. Look what the USA did in Chile. Kill a democratically elected president, is Salvador Allende. Yep. Place fascist Pinochet. The country's still suffering from the fucking American interests. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The communists are super nationalists. Yeah, that's why they trade with everybody and open their borders, right? That's pretty common, right? Like, Roosevelt in 1939 said about the president of Nicaragua, Somoza may be a son of a bitch, but he's our son of a bitch. Yeah. Like, no, we just get to ignore that, right, Isaac? That's just it. Like, this is how the death cult perpetuates itself, right? Just defer to the hierarchy, right? Worship the hierarchy. And if facts or evidence come forward, religious ideologies don't need to bend to facts or evidence. They don't, right? Religious ideologies exist to reinforce themselves. And the capitalist death cult is a religious ideology. They don't care about, like, it's the same thing that Christians do when confronted with facts and evidence, right? They just defer to their God, right? They don't change their worldview. They don't change the way they think. They just say God has a plan. Well, the money has a plan. The invisible hand of the free market will make it all work, right? Let chaos reign. And it's all... So this religious ideology doesn't respond to facts and evidence, because that, if it did respond to facts and evidence, they would stop being capitalists, right? They would start to be at least anarchists or Marxists or something, right? Something that actually had a basis and a foot in reality, right? Like like at least like capitalists that pretend like history didn't happen is like crazy to me. Like, it's crazy to me. Ha ho says, no, I'm not a Nazi. Yeah, you might want to be careful with that nationalist talk then. Because, like, nationalism makes a type of sense in the same way that a child thinks their parent is a superhuman, right? That it makes sense that a person would believe that the people who are directly around them are the greatest in the world, and that everything that happens here should be everything that happens in the world should be exclusively for the benefit of the people of this very tight group of people that we've drawn an invisible line around, right? It makes a type of sense. In the same way that it makes sense that a child would view their parent as a superhuman person, right? But as you grow up and as you get older and as you move around and as you learn more, you begin to see very clearly that, no, your dad is not a superhuman, right? He's just a fucking guy, right? Trying his best, God bless him, right? Doing some stuff, maybe having successes, maybe having failures, right? But existing in the world and being there, right? And so too is the truth of your nation, right? That your nation is just trying its best and making mistakes and being a dumbass most of the time, right? And it's especially true of Canada in this moment. Like, Canada is being as dumb a dumbass. Oh yeah, I definitely wanted to share this, right? Let's be gone with these illusions that Israel is not doing a genocide, right? Leaked Israeli plan to ethnically cleanse Gaza, right? Israeli culture magazine Mekamit published on the 28th of October a leaked document issued by Israel's Ministry of Intelligence recommending the occupation of Gaza and total transfer of its 2.3 million inhabitants to Egypt's Sinai Peninsula. The document, issued on the 13th of October, identifies a plan to transfer all residents of the Gaza Strip to North Sinai as the preferred option among three alternatives regarding the future of the Palestinians in Gaza at the end of the current war between Israel and the Hamas-led Palestinian resistance. So, it's over, right? This is a genocide. Very, very black and white, very clear. Like, the Israelis themselves have stated it. We have the documents. This is a smoking gun, right? And so if anybody is to stand in front of you and say that Israel's not doing a genocide, well, the Israelis seem to think they are. This is what I keep talking about, guys. Whenever I talk about genocides, whenever people come in here with their Holodomor bullshit or their Uyghur genocide bullshit, right? When cultures commit genocides, they say so. Right? Very clearly, it's always the case. They draw up plans. They draw up documents. They say they're going to do it. They enact a plan. Right? There's no such thing as a culture that just does a genocide. Right? This is a major event that is planned, discussed, voted on, openly organized, and here's the document. Right? Here it is. This is what a genocide actually looks like. So be gone with all of this bullshit that comes out of the Nazis, right? Be gone with all of this nonsense that says that there is such a thing as a silent, invisible genocide that doesn't happen, right? We have footage, we have evidence, We literally have the state of Israel declaring their intentions to do it. So, no. Bye-bye, X-Raptor. We don't allow Nazis in the chat. Or Zionists, for that matter. So goodbye to you. Maybe grow up a little bit, right? Get out of your dad's basement. We're good with you. You can go away. How come my ban thing isn't coming up? That's fun. It's fun that this guy is somehow immune to my banning. You should definitely be banned. We don't allow Nazi apologists in the chat. Very straightforwardly. Like, very, very, very straightforwardly. Huh. How come I can't get rid of this guy? That's new. I should put in a report about that. Because, like, definitely should be able to ban these people. But Hamas 1988 charter sounds like something Hitler wrote. Yeah, as long as you ignore reality, right? Like, as long as you ignore reality and you ignore facts and evidence, you can make these claims, right? That it's wrong that a country should be able to defend themselves is essentially your statement, right? Like, that's all. Like, as long as you say that people should not be able to defend themselves, and as long as you ignore the occupation, you can basically make whatever claim you like, right? And it's very straightforward. Real nationalism is not like Nazism. No, it just inevitably leads there. Like, it just inevitably leads there, my man. Like, I think you're fooling yourself. Like, really. I just think you're fooling yourself. Like, you think that there can be a nationalism that doesn't go down to fascism. You think that it can happen. And nope, it happens. That's how it goes. That's the step-by-step procedure. That's the book. Right? It's interesting how motivated nationalists are to deny and erase chunks of their nation for stupid reasons instead of feeding their children. Yeah, thanks, Cotton. Always laying it out, right? Yeah, it's interesting how nationalists are usually the ones that think poverty is fine, right? That our nation should be strong and powerful, and we should defend our borders, and we should have no immigrants, and brown people are inferior, but if you're poor, then get the fuck out of here. Like, it's kind of weird. Like, it's everybody's a nationalist, and everybody should be protected in the nation except the poor. Right? Like, and we're willing to fund millions and millions of dollars for cops, but not a penny for a person sleeping on the street. It's pretty incredible how that works. Yeah, ethno-states end up doing the genocides by their very design. Yeah, that's the whole point, isn't it? That's the whole point of an ethno-state, right? Yeah, and it is to create a superior race. And so it's only a matter of time until you turn against. And if it hadn't been this moment, it would have been another. And eventually they just would have made up an excuse. Because that's how it works. A nationalism that actually acknowledges other people sounds legitimate. Does that exist? No. And I'll tell you why. Stop animal murder torture, which it doesn't exist because the moment a country were to actually acknowledge the rights of people, it would cease being nationalist by its very definition. That as soon as it ascended in its mind as a people, as a nation, the idea that people are sacrosanct and that people have rights and that nations do not have rights. Institutions do not have rights, right? Institutions do not have the right to exist. Institutions do not need people to justify. Institutions do not get to ask people to justify themselves to it. It's the other way around. That institutions are the ones that constantly need to justify themselves to people. And if they can't, then they go away. And so a nation is an institution. And if a nation were to suddenly go, oh, wait, this is all about people. This is all about helping people and ensuring that people are safe and that ensuring that everybody has access, well, then it would cease to be nationalist. Why? Because it would begin to care about poor people coming into what everybody considers its borders. It would begin to care about what's going on with its neighbors. It would begin to care about what's happening internationally. It would begin to operate in the world with compassion and empathy. And it would begin to actually say, hey, we can actually like you can win and so can we, and we can actually organize with one another, right? And maybe we'll take a bit of a loss here, but we understand things like goodwill, right? We understand that being nice to your neighbors and helping people around you is good generally, and so we're going to do that, right? So if a society was nationalist and said, we are nationalists, we are going to care about our people, we are going to alleviate poverty, and we're going to help all that kind of stuff, well, then it would cease to be nationalist by its very definition. Because you can't simultaneously close your borders and deport people and create concentration camps and arrest groups of people and kick in people's doors and round up people and have ICE detention centers and create havoc and chaos everywhere you go while simultaneously saying, but we care. Like, it doesn't work that way. You can lie about it if you like, right? You can lie. That's one thing. But to actually do it, to actually care about people primarily, and to ascend people, citizens, humans, and to say, this is what we care about helping. That the only reason a nation should exist is for the benefit of the people. Well, the moment you do that, you can't be nationalist anymore. You just can't. My statement is not actually that all nationalism is bad. My statement, I believe that nationalism is inevitable. Like, in the same way that a child views their parent as a person with superpowers, as like a child will come to the eternal defense and take everything their father says as sacrosanct, that this is my guide into the world, and everything my father says is this is what's important, right? So too is sort of the nationalist spirit. It's natural that people would look around them and be like, this is my tribe. Or it's a very tribal kind of a thing. And so it's inevitable, and it's a powerful force that exists in society. It's how people begin in the world. And I do think that a society that is nationalist can do things that are of benefit for their own people, right? But they can also do things that are outrageous, right? That harm other groups. And so you should always be very suspicious, in the same way that you should be suspicious about the motivations of a 6-year-old, right? Like, a 6-year-old comes up to you and says, like, hey, can I hang on to the cookie jar for safekeeping? Well, what the fuck do you think's going to happen? Right? And maybe they'll go out and give cookies to their friends, and maybe they'll do some nice stuff with the cookies or whatever. But chances are good they'll just fucking eat all the cookies, right? And break the jar while they're at it. Because they're 6, right? Because they're just a 6-year-old. And that's so you should have a good deal of skepticism of what the 6-year-old thinks. And frankly, nationalists are of that quality. Right? They're just kind of kiddish in the way that they look at the world and the way they think about things. And they're not actually being serious about what's actually happening in the world. They don't really ever have solutions. The solutions that they do have don't actually work the way that they think they should. Because at the end of the day, the world doesn't break down that way. The world isn't broken down by nations. Right? That nations exist as an institution created by imperial power, right? In order to organize us under imperial power. That there isn't actually such a thing as a nation, right? It's just an idea. It's just a thought. It's just a concept. But, like, think of how weird it is, right? Really actually think about how weird the idea of a nation actually is, right? That here, let's open Google Maps, really make our point. Right, make our point as clearly as we can. Let's, I don't know, pick random place. Sure. Let's go here. Fine. Armenia and Azerbaijan. If I live here, right? If I live right here, boink, I'm right here. Just some random place I picked, right? What's that saying? Kalbajar, right? If I'm here, well, am I more Azerbaijani or Armenian, right? Do I have more in common with that guy, right? Or do I have more in common with the guy that lives in Baku, right? But there's an invisible line there that definitely exists. You can tell because it's a line. Look, it exists. Serious, solid line, right? Or is it the case that this was just sort of a line that was picked along geographical lines probably a couple thousand years ago that is always up for negotiation and is always debatable, that probably follows a mountain range or some other geographical feature that everybody just sort of understands? It's like, okay, the power of Azerbaijan somewhat ends about here, and the power of Armenia somewhat ends up here, and so we understand that what happens in this area is under this jurisdiction, and what happens under this area is under this jurisdiction. Sure. But to then, like, say, I live here, therefore the guy that lives right across that border is a piece of shit, or shouldn't be trusted, or if this guy over here falls into some kind of distress or is in trouble, then me helping him is somehow against, I'm not a patriot or whatever, right? All of this nonsense that can happen. As opposed to, like, the reality, which is that if the only thing that was dividing me from the guy across the way was an invisible border that only exists really in our mind as a concept or idea, and he needed somebody to go over there to help him, I'd just go. Right? I don't need to file a passport or something, right? And if somebody told me I had to, like, let's say his house catches on fire, I'm like looking across the way, and the invisible line is there, and his house is on fire, and I've got a bucket full of water. I'm just going to go over there and I'm going to throw that bucket of water onto his fire, right? And if somebody came over and be like, well, you crossed the line, fuck you. Like, fuck you, right? That what happens with the nationalist ideology, which again I say is inevitable, right? But what happens with it is that the institution of the nation supersedes the reality of humanity. That we are actually humans, right? We are actually living beings that exist in the world first. And these institutions exist in order to, they claim, in order to safeguard us and protect us. Well, they need to justify themselves in that regard. And can they? Can they justify themselves? Right? Mucho says the actions shown the truth. Cuba, as an example, bringing the situation they've been in for so long. In the last huge crisis with Ebola in Western Africa, no country in the world sent more doctors than Cuba. We were from Denmark, 6 people. There were at least 250 doctors from Cuba. How bad socialist countries are, yeah. An embarrassment for Canada is, in my view, the fact that Cuba has more doctors. Cuba has more doctors than Canada, not per capita. More doctors. There are more doctors in Cuba than there are in Canada. This is a shameful. This should be a shame. Canada should be ashamed of itself for living in that kind of reality. That Cuba has shown very clearly what a successful communist country can do under duress. Right? That they have managed to equalize and create a stability in their society while the boot of capital is on their back. Right? It's pretty impressive. And anytime capitalists point to Cuba and say, oh, but they're so poor, it's like, yeah, you're keeping them that way. Right? You've literally created a ring around Cuba and said you can't trade with anybody. It's called a sanction regime, right? There's destroyers off their coast that if you tried to bring stuff in, it'd be an international incident like the Cuban Missile Crisis was, right? And so Cuba can't trade with anybody. Hopefully its relationship with China will change that, right? And they'll be able to get their goods into a market that will actually trade with them meaningfully, which will increase the general prosperity of Cuba, right? But like, if you put your hands around somebody and strangle them, and they're struggling to breathe, right? And then you say it's your fault that you can't breathe, it makes you a fucking psycho. And that's the United States of America to a T, right? Like, to an absolute T. Oh, yeah, I'm trying to find a family doctor right now myself, my man. Good luck, right? Good luck. I like this, but the problem, yeah, and believe me, like, stop. I understand. Like, nations exist and there are reasons why they exist, right? Like, it makes more logic if you're an imperialist. Like, if you're a pro-imperialist person, if you're pro-empire, right, borders make sense. And also, like, they do make sense in a type of, like, and again, like, it makes sense to say that the people living in an area should be the ones that make the decisions of what happened in that area, right? Like, that's a somewhat quasi-nationalist idea. Like, it just makes sense that the people of Spain would be the ones that make the rules for Spain, right? The people of Madrid should probably make their own rules, right? Like, if Paris came over and told Madrid how to live, I think the people of Madrid would be like, hey, eat a dick. What are you doing? Get the fuck out of here, right? And they would be right to do so. That makes a type of sense. And so you do have to kind of draw the line at some point. Where is it? Right? Well, it's kind of up for negotiation, isn't it? Right? And it doesn't actually exist. And usually when there are border disputes, as there are always border disputes, it's over discovered resources. Always. Right? Like, oh, we were in the mountains and we found a copper mine. We found a vein of copper in there. Right on the border between China and India. Right? We found right over here. Like we found you can see how these lines, right? They're all dotted because they're in dispute. Right? They're in dispute. And why? Because they keep finding resources. And so they're like, well, 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago, right? And so there's all the dispute. Border disputes are common. We're just not used to them in the United States because the borders were essentially drawn by colonizers. They came in, eradicated the First Nations people that worked here, enslaved the black population, threw them in, made them do all the work, and then basically just sat down amongst each other and drew up the lines and said, this is where they are, and everybody went, yeah, okay. And that was it. Right? So there is no like border disputes. And there is still, it's failing, and we're watching it fail. The federated body of the United States is failing. We probably, maybe not in our lifetimes, but definitely shortly thereafter, there's going to be a balkanization event in the United States where the federal government loses its authority and the states begin to just take control of themselves. That's pretty common in falling empires. And so it's going to happen in the United States. And when that happens, that's when border disputes will show up. And because the United States is so young as a nation, right, as an empire, it's just not used to these ideas. It's not used to the idea that the invisible line that we drew up through agreement isn't sacrosanct, that there can be negotiation and debate, and that border disputes are common. And sometimes border disputes are straight up resolved just by both sides being like, look, we can both make money here. Like, why don't we just both agree that we just kind of share these resources? It's like kind of right on both of our borders. Can we just agree? And a lot of times it's like, yeah, sure, okay. Right? Or sometimes it's just like 30-70. Like there are just agreements that get made. And but that's the nature of border disputes, and we're just not used to them. Right? We're just not used to border disputes. Yeah, the U.S. is a strange place, absolutely. But it is important to remember. There's a couple of things that are really important to remember about the United States, right? It is so fucking new. The United States as an entity, the United States of America, right? Like it wants us to believe that it is eternal, right? That the United States wants us to believe that it is an undeniable fact of reality that the United States of America exists. And it's unbelievably new, right? It only has the power that it has because during World War II, every other place got blown up, right? The United States was just the only place that wasn't blown up post-World War II. But now, as we're persisting into the future, we're beginning to see that the United States is really happy with blowing itself up now. Right? It's happy to rip up its industrial base and send it over to China. It's happy to destroy its cities. It's happy to turn every city into just a hellscape full of homeless people. It's happy to expand its deserts. It's happy to poison its land. It's happy to do it, and it's doing it all to itself, right? While the rest of the world is going, yeah, we should probably not. We should probably not. We should probably actually try to get in the way of these deserts. We should actually probably try to spread greenery into these deserts. We should probably cherish our clean water and cherish our land. And we should probably help our citizens and probably try to improve the quality of life for the citizens. We should probably build things, right? We should probably build infrastructure. We should probably create projects. The fact that the United States has no projects, right? That should tell you a lot. The United States does not have a unifying project. How are you united? In what way is the United States united, actually? Can anybody point to anything that the United States does that actually unifies the United States besides war, which is by its very definition a non-unifying force? Like, America doesn't build rail. It doesn't build roads. It's not even doing things like building a big tower. It's not even trying to go to like, the closest thing I guess you have is someone like Elon Musk. We're going to go to Mars. That's a serious thing. We're certainly not militarizing space, which is obviously what they're doing, right? Anybody who's sitting out there being like, yeah, they're definitely going to get to Mars and they're definitely going to colonize. They can't house the homeless in America. They're not housing the homeless on Mars. They're not doing that. That's not a real thing that's actually going to happen, right? Maybe they'll shoot some people over there and those people will die there, right? Maybe that's what will happen. But they're definitely not interested in like colonizing Mars. They're militarizing space. So it's not really a unifying project. And because of the nature of the divide of wealth that exists within America, most people know that they're not the ones going to Mars, right? Like, I'm not going to Mars, right? That's not happening. That's not a real thing for me. Maybe I get to sit here and watch some rich cocksucker kill himself going to Mars. That's what I'm really rooting for. Like, those rich cocksuckers killed themselves trying to go see the Titanic, right? Right? Well, instead it'll be right? Or hey, we landed. Oh God, we fucked up because we're stupid. Oh no, we don't have any food or oxygen. Because space is worse than under the sea. Good news, everyone. Good news, everyone. Taylor Swift is now officially a billionaire, according to Rag Forbes. Thanks, Tinker. Isn't it great that we have billionaires and that we do that? Isn't that wonderful? Right? I'd support you going to Mars. We here at the Canadian Commie do not endorse sentiments of genocide. Very, very, very simple and straightforward stuff. Wow, they're not actually letting me bring up a ban list. This is odd. I should probably look into that, because that seems wrong. Seems wrong. Am I not the administrator right now? Oh, well. Yeah, no more billionaires. Like, straight up. Yeah, it helps when your parents buy you a record label. My favorite thing that Taylor Swift ever said was that she said, I grew up a normal life, and then you just take a look at a picture of her house, and it's straight up a mansion. You're just like, oh, you like lived in a mansion. Oh yeah, a regular normal house with my millionaire parents. Content writes, I actually do think that blue states should just break from federalism and keep overwhelming military forces, keep these budding fascist theocracies in their space. Maybe have some underground rail. I actually think that the first state that breaks off is Texas, right? I think that Texas is probably the first state that actually legitimately breaks off, because that's where all the billionaires have gone, right? So there's a lot of money in Texas right now, and the religion of capitalism is like really pounding its pulpit in Texas. Because of the decline of the empire, it's going to need to pay its bills just to keep the lights on soon enough. And so what that means is that they're going to have to turn to the billionaire class, because these are the only guys that are going to have any money. And they're going to say, okay, like, we're going to raise your taxes 0.01%, right? So that we actually can have like a military, right? So that we can actually do some of this military adventurism, right? Like, if you want to ship all your money over to Ukraine, and if you want to ship all your money over to Israel, right? How are you going to pay for that? Right? How are you going to pay for that? Well, how you're going to pay for that is you're going to raise taxes on billionaires. That's how it happens, ultimately. Right? You can't just let big, gigantic, draconic piles of gold pile in the corner, right? For indefinitely. There eventually comes a moment where, in order to actually pay for some of this stuff, they're going to need to turn to the people who are hoarding it, which is the billionaire class, and say, yeah, we need it. And you know what the billionaires are going to do? They're going to fund an independence campaign. And it's going to be very successful, because what they're going to do is they're going to turn to the working class, right? Like Elon Musk, who lives in Texas, is going to turn to the working class and say, hey, are you sick and tired of paying taxes to these guys? They're just sending all your money overseas to make Palestinian skeletons or whatever. And it's going to be a moment where the desires of the working class and the desires of the billionaire class are going to align, and they're going to run an independence movement, and they'll break off. Because that's how it happens. That the billionaires don't want to pay for this stuff. They want to keep the wealth for themselves because they like themselves and they like money, right? And they believe that they're at the top of the hierarchy and that the government should work for them. And if it doesn't, then they'll get rid of it, right? It's real fucking straightforward shit. And that's how the balkanization process will happen in the United States. That it begins probably in Texas, perhaps in California, perhaps. Yeah, billionaires are the only ones left to tax because the government can't tax the homeless. Well, the government actually does have a way to tax the homeless. It's called prison, right? That's actually how the government is taxing the homeless, right? They're just rounding up people and putting them in prisons and putting them to work, right? In prison camps, essentially, right? That's what the prison system actually is. So it is a way to tax the poor, right? They just do it by forcing them into prison slavery. Very straightforward. Dude, are we straight up getting some Harry Potter in the chat? We have some people say yeah, I love this, right? If you're too, so hold on. I'm Finnish. I have Finnish roots. If I have Finnish blood, but I can't speak the language, am I still Finnish? It depends. Let's say if you're 2% Finnish, I wouldn't call you Finnish. How much Finnish blood is enough to make someone Finnish? I'd say about 50%. I don't know. I would think that living there probably has something to do with it, even though it is kind of an arbitrary distinction. And then tell that to the Malfoys. Fantastic. Yeah, they don't get much labor out of prisoners, but they extract a lot of money from the government by maintaining prisons. Yeah, that's true. And I disagree with that, by the way. They definitely get a lot of labor out of prisoners. Like, they don't have to pay them, right? Anything that gets made in prisons is basically free. So, like, it's very clearly prison slavery, right? That's the reason why they're doing it. Is because it's free labor, right? So they are obviously getting stuff. They're obviously getting benefits from doing it. DM, good to see you, my man. John, what are your thoughts on Alberta pulling out of the Canada pension plan, another form of privatization, perhaps? I don't think it's privatization. I think it's abandonment. That's all. Like, it's just abandonment. That sure, they'll create this, like, privatization grift. But, look, the billionaire class and the rich of Alberta, because Alberta is a very rich place, they are looking at the Canada pension plan and they think to themselves that money could be ours. We don't need to help poor people or help the elderly or help anybody, right? Because we're psychopathic rich and we want that money for ourselves. And so the grift, the pitch that we'll do for these old people is we'll say, the Canada pension plan is actually inefficient, that we could have made more money for you just by investing it in stocks or whatever. Forget about the fact that the economy collapsed 4 times, but forget about facts, evidence, reality. Like, none of that matters when you're grifting and you're a religious ideologue, right? We'll get you out of the Canada pension plan and we'll invest that in the invisible hand of the free market. And of course, what's going to happen, right? All of those pension funds are going to collapse and they'll just siphon them away and vulture them away. And those elderly people will be rendered homeless, right? The fastest growing cohort of homeless people are boomers. And it's happening rapidly because the promises that the boomers were given about how the system of capital worked are being abandoned. And this is another form of that abandonment. It's exactly the Alberta pension as a last-ditch effort to funnel public money into the billionaire pockets. It's exactly what it is. It is exactly what it is. That the entire system is siphoning as much wealth as it possibly can into this small class of billionaires in order to calcify and kill the actual governing system that exists. And there will be a moment when that governing system will attempt to assert itself out of necessity, more or less. That it won't matter how corrupt it gets. It won't matter how evil it gets. It won't matter how dark and bleak it gets. That eventually it's going to have to say, well, look, this is the mechanism by which we run like basic functions of communication with the world, right? That this is how we actually talk to France. Like, this is how we actually trade with other groups and do all kinds of... This is how we organize the military, right? Like, this is how we organize the military, is through these bodies. We actually do need to tax you. We actually do need that. Like, it's just the bottom line. We have to. We have no other choice. And the billionaire class has gotten so wealthy and so powerful and so rich that they'll just walk away and basically just say, okay. And they'll have their own private military and their own private security forces and their own private forces, so that it will be a big enough threat. Probably not a threat that is so big that they could actually defeat the military, but a big enough threat that nobody's going to want to take that fight, right? It's like how when a bear rolls up on you and you act very big, well, the bear would fuck you up, but it doesn't take the fight because it's worried for its own safety in that fight, right? It doesn't want to lose an eye taking you down. And so chances are good that these billionaires will just break off, and you'll just end up with Musktopia and Bezos Town and like these like Buffettville, you know, like Gates, the Gates Foundation or whatever. Like, it's just ridiculous. Have a good one, Mucho. Good to see you. And so the entire, like, this is a system of extraction and abandonment at this point. And that's all it is, right? That's all it is. That the people who are within the system pretending like something else is happening are either utterly deranged, delusional, or are just lying to you, right? And are just complicit. Like guys like Bernie Sanders. Keep investing in the system. Vote for the president that will actually legitimately try to change things, but definitely will not. Right? Definitely will not. Like, that's the grift. That's the grift. All right, guys, I need to pause for a minute so I can go use the washroom. Good opportunity to like, share, subscribe. Maybe tell people I exist out in the world. If you have $1 jangling around in your pocket, be sure to send it my way. Donating to the Patreon gets you in the Discord. All right, I'll be right back. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh, people bickering in the Twitch chat. That's how I know I'm successful. Now I know I've reached final success. It's happened. People bickering in Twitch chat equals great success. Why many scientists are now saying Climate change is an all-out emergency. Hey, they're getting desperate. Do-do-do-do, they're getting desperate. Do-do-do-do, here's the Washington Post talking about a thing we've been saying all the time. Here it is. Here it is. Here they are, the capitalists are getting desperate because of their overt and crazed stupidity and psychopathic nature. They've realized that they've pulled out a gun and shot themselves in the foot. They've recognized that they're finally actually also going to die, right? The psychos are actually going like, wait a minute, hold on a second. If a wildfire comes through and burns down the town that I live in, I too will also be burnt down. Whoa. I thought I had superhuman powers and that it was the invisible hand of the free market. Yuckles. And they're getting desperate, right? And they're getting especially desperate because they know that the conservatives and the Republicans are the ones that are taking power, i.e. the people who deny the existence of all this shit, right? And so it's pretty unlikely at this stage in the game that we're not going to experience extreme negative consequences of climate change, right? My thoughts on the liberal carbon tax policy: always was a fraud, always was a grift perpetrated against the Canadian public. The grift goes like this. Hey, I'm Justin Trudeau. I'm here to say climate change is real. Dum, 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 dum. And everybody goes, oh my God, finally a politician that's actually acknowledging that reality exists. Oh my goodness, look everyone. It's a federal politician running for the seat of the prime ministership, saying out loud in front of all of us, simultaneously all at once, that the thing that we've known has been real all along is real. And moreover, he actually says that he's going to do something about it. Compare that to literally any other politician that's ever stood up and said one word in Canada, and that by itself is worth going, oh yeah, okay, let's hear what this guy has to say. And so Justin Trudeau comes into power saying things like, we're going to do electoral reform, legal weed, sure, climate change is a thing, right? And then he basically turns to the fossil fuel industry and says, look, I've got to actually convince these gullible rubes that I care about this climate change shit. What can you give me, fossil fuel industry, to con these gullible rubes into believing that climate change, that I've got an idea or a policy that's actually going to matter for climate change? And the fossil fuel industry turns around and says to Trudeau, you should put in a tax on carbon. That's what you should do. You certainly shouldn't seize the means of production. You certainly shouldn't put a tax on us. You certainly shouldn't say to the fossil fuel executives that I am going to tax you or punish you somehow, right? We're certainly not going to create an industry standard. We're certainly not going to pass a law that says that if you pollute any more than X or Y, that we're going to put you in fucking jail, right? None of that. None of the serious stuff that might actually work, right? We're certainly not going to cap how much pollution we can produce. We're certainly not going to cap how much coal you're allowed to dig up or anything like that. No, none of that. We are going to tax the people. We're going to turn to the population of Canada and say, it's a you problem. You're the ones that are doing it. Certainly not the multinational corporations that are selling fossil fuels abroad, right? Certainly not the enormous institutions and conglomerates that come together to actually fund a military that goes overseas to blow up countries to further propagate this problem, right? Certainly they're not actually dredging all of this, all of the corpses of the dead out of the ground in order to funnel them into war machines in order to do war overseas. That's not certainly what's happening, even though the biggest polluters on the planet are the fucking war industry, right? Oh, but it's a you problem. Drink less lattes, right? So, yeah, use more paper bags. Solving the problem, right? The people, right, went, a politician that's acknowledging the problem, and with a policy. Holy cow, an idea. And now we're years on, and we can see pretty clearly now that the carbon tax was a failure. It didn't work, right? It hasn't worked. Our fossil fuel usage has only gone up. Our pollution profile has only gone up because it wasn't supposed to work. It wasn't designed to work. It was designed to pacify the public, and it worked. It worked for that. It pacified the public. And now the conservatives are going to come in and they're going to get rid of it, because all it really ever was a punitive tax against people who actually use fossil fuels, right? And so they've managed to build a coalition and build a movement against the carbon tax. That's why they keep talking about it. And they likely will get rid of it, right? And why? Because it doesn't do anything. It was always just for show. It didn't actually work. It's not a serious policy, right? That the idea kind of works on paper when you think about it, but like the moment you actually realize who's actually doing the polluting and who's actually doing the digging, right? You realize pretty quickly, like, taxing somebody who's driving to Wendy's, right? It's not going to get it done, right? It's not going to actually legitimately reduce their footprint or reduce how much. All it's going to do is make them pay more, which, another way to siphon more money out of the public. So this whole hoopla that the conservatives and the liberals are going back and forth on in regards to the carbon tax is just showmanship. It's just whipping up their own bases, really. Like, it doesn't actually have the impact that people think it does. And it's just become something of a talking point, something of a wedge issue for them to kind of like go back and forth on. But like, it doesn't really cost people that much extra. And there is also like the rebate aspect of it. So it's like, it's what the average Canadian always does, right? We're completely willing to spend $1,000 if it means we can bend over and pick up a penny, and it's just how we are. We're gonna fund $1 billion to fund cops to beat up people who are asking for $10,000. It's just kind of how we are, because we're following a religious ideology, and the religious ideology needs to be followed dogmatically. Like, you can't actually look at practical solutions that have practical implications, because then the losers of that end up being the powerful and the wealthy, right? Like, you can't do that because they need to be worshipped as gods. John, what should be the national language of the trans ethno-state? I'm just going to no comment that, bread cultist. Like, I know that you're joking, but I just feel like I'm setting myself up. So, why many scientists are now saying climate change is an all-out emergency? Bill Ripple had never been an activist. That's it. That right there is a Stephen King start right there. The Oregon State University ecologist had spent his career wandering through the hills and canyons of Yellowstone National Park, tracking the health of wolves and other large carnivores. Nor was he particularly outspoken. As a college student, he was so concerned about taking a debate class that he considered dropping out and returning to his family farm. But then, in 2018, Ripple saw pictures of a town called Paradise, California, completely destroyed by wildfire. Houses had disappeared in the blaze. All that remained were twisted hunks of metal and glass. Ripple started writing a new academic paper. He called it World Scientists' Warning of a Climate Emergency. He sent it to colleagues to see if anyone wanted to sign on. By the time the paper was published in the journal Bioscience in 2019, it had 11,000 signatures from scientists around the world. It now has more than 15,000. My life completely changed, Ripple said. He is the subject of a 30-minute Oregon State University documentary. He gets constant media requests and calls to collaborate from scientists around the world. Last week, he published a new paper on the state of the climate system. It was called Entering Uncharted Territory. Scientists are more willing to speak out, Ripple said. As a group, we've been pretty hesitant historically. But, he added, I feel like scientists have a moral obligation to warn humanity. After a few years of record-breaking temperatures and extreme weather events, Ripple's experience is a sign of how climate scientists, who once refrained from entering the public fray, are now using strident language to describe the warming planet. References to climate emergency and climate crisis, once used primarily by activist groups like the UK-based Extinction Rebellion or the US-based Sunrise Movement, are spiking in the academic literature. Meanwhile, scientists' communication to the media and the public has gotten more exasperated and more desperate. On Monday, scientists released a paper showing that the world's carbon budget, the amount of greenhouse gas emissions the world could still emit without boosting global temperatures more than 1.5 degrees Celsius, has shrunk by a third. The world only has 6 years left at current emission levels before the racing past that temperature limit. There are no technical scenarios globally available in the scientific literature that would support that that is actually possible, or can even describe how that would be possible. Georgi Rogelej, a climate scientist at Imperial College London, told reporters in a call. Tim Lenton, one of the co-authors on Ripple's most recent paper and a professor of Earth System Science at the University of Exeter, said that 2023 had been filled with temperatures so far beyond the norm that they're very hard to rationalize. This isn't fitting a simple statistical model, he said. Lenton said he isn't afraid to use terms like emergency or climate and ecological crisis. If you say urgent to a politician, that really isn't enough. The language has spilled into academic publications as well. As recently as 2015, only 32 papers on the Web of Science research database included the term climate emergency. In 2022, 862 papers contained the phrase. Academic papers including the term climate emergency. It wasn't always this way. In the 2000s and even the early 2010s, most scientists shied away from making any statements that could be seen as political in nature. Jacqueline Gill, a professor of climate science and paleoecology at the University of Maine, said that when she was doing her PhD in the late 2000s, senior academics warned her against deviating at all from the science when interacting with the media or the public. We were actively told if we start to talk about solutions, if we start to talk about the policy implications of our work, we will have abandoned our supposed scientific neutrality, Gill said, and then people will not trust us anymore on the science. Susan Joy Hassel, a science communication expert who has worked with climate researchers for years, says that even a decade ago, climate scientists were uncertain what their role was in communicating the dangers of rising temperatures. I think at least some of them felt that scientists communicate through IPCC reports, Hassel said, referring to the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. We do our science, we publish, we put together these reports, and it's kind of up to other people to listen. Now, she says, that has changed. We have reached this stage of crisis, she said. It isn't just the fact that emissions still aren't going down, or that policy hasn't responded quickly enough to the challenge. Carbon dioxide emissions related to energy use have continued to climb, even following the brief downturn of the COVID-19 pandemic. As the impacts of climate change escalate, scientists say that their language has changed to meet the moment. When it comes to terms like climate emergency, Gill says, it's a little bit of strategy and a lot of honesty. While climate scientists are still discussing whether warming is accelerating, she added, it's clear the impacts are becoming more noticeable and in your face. Hassel said that the shift is simple. In the 2000s, she said, climate change wasn't yet at the level of an emergency. She recalls a 2009 report called the Copenhagen Diagnosis, which analyzed climate science to date and made suggestions for how to reach net zero carbon emissions. If world governments had acted swiftly, the world would have only had to cut emissions by a bit over 3% per year. We call that the bunny slope, Hassel recalled. If, on the other hand, governments didn't start the transition until 2020, cuts would have to be much steeper, up to 9% per year. We called that the double black diamond, she said. Despite the brief respite in CO2 emissions during the pandemic, humanity's trajectory has veered closer to the double black diamond path. Don't you love that this article keeps saying, yeah, we completely did it. We obviously did it during the pandemic, right? During the COVID-19 pandemic, we did the thing we need to do. You know how we did it? We sent everybody home. We paid their bills. We told the capitalists to shut the fuck up. We all sat in a corner and we did fuck all. And what happened? Emissions went down. Pollution went down. It worked completely and we could do it again, but we're too dim-witted and stupid because capitalism, we gotta make money for psychopaths. At the same time, many scientists realize that even the best communication in the world isn't enough to overcome the inertia of a fossil fuel-based system and the resistance of various oil and gas companies. The problem is not that scientists haven't been communicating clearly enough, Hassel said. We communicated pretty darn clearly. Anyone who wanted to hear the message, it was there. So, what we should do is do what we did for the pandemic. Why? Because it completely worked, as the article said several times. And then we should incarcerate all of the fossil fuel industry. Literally, we should treat them like they are Nazis. We should round them up. We should have a Nuremberg trial. The people who say, I was just following orders, we should say, we've heard that one. Right? And we should lock at least the executives away. Certainly the Goebbels of the groups, right? The ones that were spreading disinformation, the ones that were lying to us the entire time. We should lock them in jail cells and forget where we put them. Right? That's what we should do to these people. And then we should send everybody home. We should have them sit in their houses like we did on the pandemic. And we should say, hey, we just need to do less. Right? So we're going to make sure everybody has food. We're going to make sure everybody has shelter. We're going to make sure everybody has access to health care. We're going to make sure everything is hunky-dory and everything's totally fine, right? So that people aren't starving and there isn't rioting and nothing's going crazy, right? Like the fucking pandemic. And you know what we're going to do? We're going to reduce emissions. And how do we know we're going to reduce emissions doing this? Because we did it already once. We already ran the test and we did the thing and we found the solution to the problem. The only thing that has ever reduced emissions in our society is when everybody just went the fuck home. And that we took the system of capital and just said, yeah, capitalists. Yeah, okay, yeah. And we told the capitalists to fuck off. Fuck off. Go away. You're not needed. You're a drain on society. You're unimportant. And in fact, many of you will go to jail. Go to jail. Like, incarcerate these people. Obviously. Like, to me, this is so blisteringly obvious that for anybody to actually say out loud in front of my face that we don't have a solution to these problems, I think you're demented. We obviously have a solution. Very clear solution that we could obviously do. Why? How do we know? Because we did it. We already did it. We could do it again. Right? Only we could do it intentionally, on purpose. But John, what about the wholesome, salt-of-the-earth truckers that need to work? Yeah, send them home. Give them a paycheck. Right? Money isn't real in the first place. The only people who need to get in the way and act like the fucking parasites in the situation and have everybody go to work, you gotta go to work, are the fucking parasitical capitalists that do nothing of value. Right? You only have to go to work to pay for them. And as soon as you recognize that, we could just be rid of them, right? They aren't actually important to the discourse, right? That we could all just be involved in the agricultural industry making food and be involved in the general maintenance of the housing supply, right? Which would require like 5% of the labor of the society in order to actually do, right? And then just say to the fucking upper management, yeah, you're not needed. Bye. We can all just sit down for a bit, right? Let's all take a siesta. Let's all take a vacation. Let's all have a moment where we walk into fields and stare at the sky, where we do nothing. Because guess what, you guys? I don't know if you've noticed this. I don't know if you guys have put this together yet. The earth created us. That we did not create the trees and the rivers and the oceans and the sky. That the earth did that. It did it all by itself. We had nothing to do with it. It was just here. And if you just stop worshiping yourself for a minute, you'll recognize that there are forces outside of yourself that are far more powerful and far more epic and important than you, that will persist well past your death. And, crazy, I know this is going to be nuts for you, it's going to really fucking blow your mind, it's perfectly capable of solving this problem by itself. That we don't actually need to do anything. We don't actually need to do anything. We don't need to create something. We don't need to devise something. We don't need to make a car. We don't need to make a climate, a carbon. We don't need to take concrete and spread it into fields like they're talking about. We don't need to put asbestos into forests. We don't need to do any of this. We don't need to blacken the sky to block UV radiation. We don't need to do any of this. We don't need to put mirrors in space in order to block the sun, right? We don't need to do any of it. We don't need to do any of that. Why? Because the earth is perfectly capable of healing itself. How do we know? It created us in the first place. It created us. It made us, not the other way around. We do not actually have the impact on the earth that we think we do. The fact that we are actually able to move the needle at all, right, shows you how far we've gotten. But it makes sense that when we do that, we do it in order to completely destroy ourselves. And so if we want to actually be here to see the universe and the earth heal itself, we need to sit in the corner. We need to take all our toys, right? Our stupid big giant trucks the size of World War II tanks. We need to take our dumb rockets we're shooting at space. We need to ground Taylor Swift's private jet. We need to tell Jeff Bezos' yacht that's so big that it has a second yacht that lives inside of it to be aground, right? We need to tell the military to calm the fuck down. And we just need to tell everybody, stay home, put your toys in the toy box, and, crazy, chill the fuck out. Maybe think about what it is you've done. Are we gonna do it? Nah. That would require something that humanity doesn't have, which is called intelligence. We don't have that. We don't have that. We're not an intelligent people. We're not an intelligent species. We don't have the capability of actually accepting our place in the world. We don't have the ability to actually say, okay, we're not gods. Oh, well, sure, we had superpowers, but we can take those superpowers and put them aside for a minute. That's fine. Oh, great and powerful Earth and great and powerful universe, we acknowledge your overwhelming might and power, and we'll put aside our other god, which is money, and we'll stop worshiping ourselves. And we'll acknowledge that our hierarchies and our institutions are failing us. And instead we'll trust in the overwhelming power and might of the universe. That's definitely something that humanity is well known for. They'll definitely do that. There's no healing? What a joke. What do you think happens, my man? Like, what do you think happens? Like, how did the earth generate us? Like, how did the earth create forests? Like, do you think the earth is not generative? Like, do you somehow think it's a dead, inert rock that's floating around? So what a weird and strange thought. until we realize that social hierarchy is not order, but extreme disorder, we won't give up our daddy capitalists. Generative absolutely implies healing. Like, what are you talking about, bro? Just kind of embarrassing, frankly. Content. Yeah, did you say put mirrors in space? I did. Yeah, that's a Bill Gates idea. Mirrors in space to fight climate change? Maybe I'll find it if I do that. Could space mirrors stop global warming? Oh yeah, guys, I had like this whole idea for today of did I delete? I kind of gave up on the idea, but it's definitely true. I got to start saving articles like this because I feel like I should make a collection of the many stupid ideas that capitalists are coming up with. I've seen them like, let's put concrete in the soil, like this kind of shit. Yeah, I didn't save it. Could space mirrors stop global warming? Like, as we get desperate, we're going to make a bunch of very stupid decisions very quickly because we're too dumb to recognize that we could just stop polluting and the earth would actually heal itself, right? That the earth has a regenerative property and it can just heal itself. The record-breaking temperatures of the past few years are getting more people thinking about bigger solutions to climate change. Ideas once thought of as wacky, still wacky, are now receiving careful consideration, including an idea that sounds straight out of science fiction. Cooling the Earth by launching reflective mirrors into space? Lowell Wood of Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory proposed a giant space mirror in the early 2000s, though he cautioned that the mirror should be considered only as a measure of last resort. Why? Because the mirror would have to have an area of 600,000 square miles, a slightly smaller area than Greenland. And launching something that big would be prohibitively expensive, not to mention probably also lead to climate change. Another option, billions of smaller mirrors. Roger Engel, researcher and optics expert at the University of Arizona, proposed that idea in 2006. In either case, the mirror or mirrors would orbit at Lagrange point L2, a gravitational stable point between the Earth and the Sun that's about 4 times the distance from the Earth to the Moon. The mirrors would be barely visible from Earth and would block just 1 to 2% of the Sun's light. But that would be enough, advocates of the scheme says. I'm glad that this article is at least like scheme, guys, scheme. To cool the planet. Even with Angel's plan, the current cost of launching 1 trillion mirrors would be $10,000 per pound, or in total, 26 times more than the current U.S. national debt. Dude, I hope it happens. I hope we do it. Mirrors. Dude, giant mirrors with ads on the bottom promoting Raid Shadow Legends. Yeah, absolutely. You can join up the phenomenon. Raid Shadow Legends. Join today. Free to start. Jeez Louise, man. Yeah. Dude, if I ever look up into the sky and see a fucking advertisement from space, like, it's over for humanity, right? Raid is an Israeli game. I did not know that. Sounds like the Star Wars program of the 1980s. Yeah, absolutely fantastic. Space lasers. So Raid is spyware. Yeah, got it. Like, you know, it's just like, I wonder if there is going to be like a moment. Like 9/11 was a moment for America. It was the moment that it finally realized, wait a minute. There are places besides America? There are places outside of our borders? There's a place called the Middle East. that we know nothing about, except that the people there wear turbans. I saw Aladdin, and there's a guy there by the name of Saddam. He's a terrorist that we fund, and we got to go over there to spread democracy. Why do they hate us so? Why? Please, Mr. George Bush, Mr. President, man, why? Why do they hate us so that they got to send planes over and blow up our buildings, Mr. President? Well, I'll tell you, honestly and truly, this is a serious answer that should be taken seriously and not at all a grift done by a psychopath in order to make billions of dollars for himself personally and murder people, which I get off on. They hate us for our freedoms. That's what it is. They certainly don't hate the fact that we've been over there blowing them up, funding people like Saddam Hussein, funding terrorist groups, overthrowing their stuff, killing their children, sending death squads through the streets, just randomly assassinating people, stealing their oil, stealing their resources, overthrowing their leadership. They certainly don't hate us for that. No, what they hate us for, and you're going to believe it because you're a bunch of gullible fucking monkeys, is our freedoms. Like, straight up, this is how America started to interact with the world. That they were just like, what? There's a place outside of America that I should care about? And so, like, is a similar thing going to happen to America with climate change? Is there going to be a moment where finally the Americans go, oh my goodness, climate change is a real thing that's real. Oh my God, we should probably care about that. Because, like, there's already been a lot, right? There's already been a lot. Haha, you guys got ads. Get added. Ha Eat it. I do not want peace. I want problems always. I don't remember who said that, but that's a quote. That's a quote from like an African leader, and I forget which one. I do not want peace. I want problems always. Like, okay, bro. Yeah, okay. Like A Peace to End All Peace is a great book that deals with the history of the West Middle East conflicts from the Crusades to the late 20th century. Literally, George W. Bush said into a camera on the public record for everyone to see, we're going to launch a crusade. Like, the people of the Middle East saw that and were like, oh, it's another Christian crusade. Okay, got it. Check. This is the 11th crusade. Got it. Like, they got it. They understood what was going on right away. That this is like, oh, this is a religious thing. They're calling it Christianity, but it's actually capitalism. Got it. I actually think that there is an event where people might actually finally go, oh, goodness me, a thing that's actually real, and that's if Miami goes under, right? That the sea level comes up and Florida's just underwater. But by then, it's going to be so late. Like, we're talking about an event that is, like, so late in the game. Because if the seawaters come up and Miami is, like, underwater, well, so too is, like, New York. Like, Manhattan will be underwater. Milo, tough, dude. You went down right before the stream, and I said to you, final pee, bud, and you actually did pee, and you pooed. So this is a grift. You're just bored, Milo. Being bored. Like, they hate us? They should be worshiping us. A couple of democratically elected government of Iran did in 1953. We did them a favor. Yeah, exactly. Billy Graham called his program Crusades. That's right. Crusaders for Christ. Yeah, that's right. When we were in those programs, because I was raised in all of that, right? When we were in those programs, we didn't think too much about it. We weren't sitting there being like, this has implications. People from the Middle East will take this seriously as a thing. And now I'm older and I'm like, yeah, bro. Like it would kind of be like calling yourself like a Klansman for Christ. It would be like that. That if there was like a children's group that started up and they all had like white clothes and they were all like Klansmen for Christ, people would be like, bro, so calling yourself like Crusaders for Christ is like, yeah, that's not good. That's bad. Not a great look. Not a great look. My favorite of the Crusades, without a doubt, no doubt at all, to really show you how absolutely much the West actually cares about its own children, was the Children's Crusade. The Children's Crusade was a failed popular crusade by European Christians to establish a second kingdom of Jerusalem in the Holy Land, said to have taken place in 1212. Although it is called the Children's Crusade, it never received the papal approval from Pope Innocent III to be an actual crusade. The traditional narrative is likely conflated from a mix of factual and mythical events, which include the preaching of visions by a French boy and a German boy. Blah, blah, blah. The variant of long-standing account, a boy begins to preach in either France or Germany, claiming that he had been visited by Jesus, who instructed him to lead a crusade in order to peacefully convert Muslims to Christianity. Through a series of portents and miracles, he gains a following of up to 30,000 children. He leads his followers south towards the Mediterranean Sea, in the belief that the sea would part on their arrival, which would allow him and his followers to walk to Jerusalem. This does not happen. The children are sold to two merchants, Hugh the Iron and William of Posqueras, who give free passage on boats to as many of the children as are willing. The pilgrims are then either taken to Tunisia, where they are sold into slavery by the merchants, or else die on a shipwreck in San Pietro Island, off Sardinia, during a gale. This system does not give a shit about its own children at all. Doesn't give a fuck. Not even a little bit. Does not give two shits whatsoever. This entire time that these kids are like going around being like, hey, let's go do a crusade, nobody's like, how about you don't? Right? Maybe you don't do that. Nah, everyone's just like, well, they're gonna go do that. That's fine. Well, off to go to the hog farm or whatever the fuck it is I do. Like, and nothing much has changed. Like, we don't actually give a fuck about our own kids. Like, we don't care at all. Like, if we actually gave a fuck about our own kids, we would be getting in the way of this climate change thing like crazy. Like absolute crazy pants. We would just be like jumping right in front of this. Like throwing ourselves onto the flames. Like what's the sacrifice that we're actually asking people to take here? Like, for real. Like, what's the real actual sacrifice that we're actually telling the average citizen? Now is the time we have to sacrifice for the future of our children. Our grandparents literally went and got on boats, were given guns, stormed beaches to get gunned down by Nazis, right? Flying in with parachutes, getting hung on trees, right? Dying in waves, millions of people just dying wave after wave against Nazi gunning positions, right? Just getting their heads blown off and getting damaged, shooting people, living in total terror, just this ridiculous, like sitting in a foxhole in the cold of winter, having just artillery shell fire bomb all over you. Stories of guys turning around and stepping out of the foxhole to go have a piss in the woods to come back and find everybody in the foxhole blown to pieces. Like, just horrifying, hellish stories of people existing in a total nightmare hellscape. And what are we asking our parents and us to do? Can you guys just stop playing with your toys for a minute? Can you just, take your toys and put them in the toy box and sit down for a minute? Can you just not go to work for a couple of minutes? Can you sit down and just we could just stop polluting for a minute, don't you think? Can't be done.
That's too much of a burden and a sacrifice to put upon myself for my children. What? You want me to not wake up at 6 a.m. in the morning and take a shit and take a shower and bleary-eyed drive my World War II-sized truck down a interstate highway to stop at Timmy's and get a big gulp-sized coffee-flavored water and go to a pointless job that everybody hates and work at it and then turn around and drive 2 hours to go back home to a house that I don't really spend any time in, fall asleep only to wake up and do it again, and you want me to stop doing that for the climate? I won't! Freedom! I have the freedom to sell myself into wage slavery and do a job that's completely pointless and drive there in my World War II-sized truck. I'm a very important person! I'm a very important person!
This is who we are. Like, this is who we are. And we just can't not do it. We can't just stop doing it. You know, we can't just look at our children, who we claim to care about, and say, yeah, I'll just sit on the couch for a little while the government pays for food and shelter like it could have always done in the first place, which it already has done once before. It could easily do again. And we just flip the capitalists off and say, yeah, fuck them. Who cares? Who cares about these guys at all? Who gives 1% of any fucks whatsoever about what these psychopaths think about anything? Right? Because they care the least about their own children. They don't care about their own children even a tiny little bit. Like, as far as they're concerned, their children exist only to be trophies. Only for them to tell funny stories about the weird little name they gave them. Oh, yeah, his name's McMatthew. Yeah, isn't that great? I put a little Mick in front of it. This one's name is a symbol. Like, we are a completely unserious people. Like, completely unserious. And yet, and this is the best part. This is the best part about us. Is that we insist that we're the best. That's the greatest. That's what turns it into just the absolute apex of everything that's so cool and amazing about our culture. Is that we are so obviously dead brain shitholes that all we do is nothing except eat shitty burgers, make shitty Marvel movies, and go to jobs that are pointless and provide no value for anyone whatsoever. And then we think we have the right to turn to cultures that are actually doing things, that are actually providing food and shelter for their citizens, that are actually building highways and railway systems, that are actually embarking in trade negotiations, that are actually trying to find a way to improve the quality of life for their own citizens, that are literally culturally obliterating deserts, that are actually going places and doing things and trying to achieve stuff, and we think that we have the right to tell them how to do anything. It's amazing. It's like we're watching Magnus Carlsen play a game of chess, and every time he makes a move, we go, I don't know about that. I don't know about that, Magnus. No, I don't know, Magnus. Like, shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. We're so embarrassing. We're so ridiculous. We're so pathetic. Like, we're so pathetic. It's that pathetic quality that everything has got now just this tinge of total desperation. That even the people who are actually in serious jobs, right, have this tinge of desperation because they know their very serious job exists within this clusterfuck of stupid absurdity, right? Like, and everybody is like our military personnel, our generals are just unbelievable pretentious jackholes who are very serious people. I'm a very serious person with a very serious job. I'm looking out for the defense of the nation. I'm here to protect America and make sure that America's doing great. You know what would be best for America? If you just fucking went home. If you just went home and sat down and didn't think about anything anymore, right? And just like what America needs to do, no doubt, is literally just go home, stop thinking about the rest of the world at all. Like, just stop thinking about the rest of the world at all. Like, get your shit together. Get your shit together, America. They won't, obviously. They're going to blow themselves up first. Right? They're going to do some dumb shit in Taiwan and fucking lose a war there, just like they lost the war in Ukraine. Right? They're probably going to lose in Israel, right? They'll probably we'll probably watch Israel just get blown off the map because the fucking forces that actually live in the region will finally be like, you guys are demons and should be gone. And like America will just recede into this shithole status because they don't actually have any credibility left. They've just got absolutely no credibility whatsoever. Like, and that's all that actually, in the end of it all, actually matters, right? Like, if you've based your empire on the idea that everybody wants my dollar, but then you make it very clear that that comes with some pretty major strings, i.e. dealing with a psychopathic death cult, then don't be too surprised when the rest of the world goes, yeah, maybe not with the dollar, right? Maybe I'll just trade with something else. Maybe I'll go over there and just trade directly with them, and I don't need to have you as an intermediary at all, right? And the American dollar just goes because Americans no longer have any credibility. What credibility do the Americans have? Who wants to deal with these guys? Who really wants to talk to these guys? The answer is other white supremacists. That's who. Yep. And they're trying to distract us with the LGBTQ plus issue again. Yeah, the West is overdue for a revolution. Yeah. Like, isn't it incredible? Like, all it took for them to waste 10 years was just to bombard the airwaves with, like, it's okay to be gay. Look, trans people exist. And that made you forget about the fact that all of your money goes to a parasite. Like, we're just very easy to trick. I shouldn't say that, actually. It takes a lot of training. It takes like 12 years of school to get you in a position where you're easy to trick, right? Like, it takes a lot of effort to create these people who are super hyper propagandized. Like, no one is as hyper propagandized as we are. Like, this notion that we're like the greatest country in the world. Like, okay, champ. Like, maybe in 1952. For like a minute. Watson, good to see you, my man. The United States is essentially Rome in its dying days. The structures of the state are there, but they're all hollowed out. Yeah. And I do think that they are going to collapse in my lifetime. Like, there are going to be just significant events that occur within the borders of America. Like, things that are going to make it very clear to everybody that the system doesn't, like, it's not really of value. It doesn't really function anymore. It doesn't provide a service to anybody. And so, why are we going to care? Oh, yeah, Gamer Jam in Twitch. I don't click on links for pretty obvious reasons, my man. Thanks, though. So here's the moment where I take a little moment and say, okay, we still have to deal with this, right? We're still all dealing with this crisis that we're all facing. That's happening in front of us. Well, here's the unfortunate truth. The unfortunate reality. The unfortunate reality is that you're going to have to talk to your neighbors about all this. That's the unfortunate reality. That you're actually going to have to build systems of mutual aid with one another. You're going to have to, like, talk to each other. Get to know your neighbors. Right? Try to, like, give them some cookies or something. Build goodwill. Because at the end of it all, like, when the real shit hits the fan, like, when the real shit is actually hitting the fan, your neighbors are the only people who you're going to be getting any support from whatsoever. Just completely. Like, when the purges happen, when the society gets locked down, when things starts to really hit the fan, right? When they really start clamping down, right? When they really start clamping down, the only people you're really going to be able to interact with are your neighbors, right? That this communication system's not going to keep going this way, right? Like, they are going to shut shit down because they know that to just let us keep talking to each other, that's crazy. That's not going to happen, right? You can already see the purges coming with the Palestinian stuff. Well, you think when Biden stands up and says something along the lines of we're gonna punish college students for being pro-Palestine, like that's a purge. That's locking people out of the system. That's locking things down, right? And it's only a matter of time until channels like mine get purged. It's only a matter of time. And so talk to your neighbors. Get to know your neighbors. Let them know that you are a reliable person who can be trusted during periods of stress. Because you can't be doing that kind of stuff while the stress is happening. Why would your channel get purged? For the same reason that Chris Hedges' channel got purged when the Ukrainian war started. For the same reason why Lee Camp's channel got purged. Like, what do you think, my man? Like, what do you think? Zelensky says he feels the West has abandoned Ukraine. Yeah, because the West has abandoned Ukraine. Like it always was going to. Like, this is how you know that ultimately Zelensky is a clown. Right? Like, Zelensky was a clown. And he always was a clown. Right? He was a professional clown. And so they elected a professional clown, and what did they end up with? A clown. Right? And what did the clown think? Oh, the clown thought that the United States was always going to have their back, and that this was going to be a war that was going to last forever, and that they were going to be able to fight the Russians back and all this kind of stuff. And everybody with any brains in their heads at all, and I know there's not a lot of them, but was just understood how this was going to go, that the United States was going to give just enough money to keep killing Ukrainians, right, to siphon as much wealth out of the populace as they possibly could, to transfer them into guns and bombs and weapons, right? They spread just enough propaganda into the system to convince people. I had people coming into this chat. Trying to convince me that, oh yeah, we're going to push the Russian line back. Yeah, the Russian line is going to happen. You watch, you're going to push the Russians back. You watch, it's going to happen. It's definitely going to happen. Yeah, I listened to an American general on Fox News say it, and so it's definitely going to happen. Like, no, obviously not. It's obviously not going to happen. And so the Americans do what the Americans have always done, historically, all the time, constantly. Every single fucking time they get into any interaction ever. What do they always do 100% of the time? Right? They blow up everything, siphon as much money away from the American people as they possibly can, kill as many people as they possibly can, steal as many resources as they possibly can, and then once that grift is over, they leave. They leave. Like always and forever. Every single time. I don't know why Zelensky's sitting there being like, I can't believe they left like they do always. Like, it is like watching, like, it's watching people fall for the same exact grift over and over and over again. It's like we're all living in a small town, and there's a guy living in the town who always 100% hits on a lady, right? He's constantly hitting on a lady, and everybody around this lady is saying, he is going to come into your house, he's going to ruin your life, he's going to get you pregnant, he's going to get you fired from your job, he's going to alienate you from your family, and when you're at your absolute weakest, he's going to walk out the door and you're never going to see him again. And how do we know? Because he's done it 12 times before. We've seen him do it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. Do not get involved with this guy. And she says, I can change him and it'll be different this time. And then when she's alone and broke and pregnant and he's gone and she's broken down and crying, we're all like, feel bad for you, sweetie. Like, I do, but Putin's the comedian, Zelensky's the clown. The West had no interest in Ukraine other than a jump-off point to get at the natural resources of Central Asia. I think that they sort of hoped that this could lead to more of a balkanization thing. That honestly, the Ukrainian situation has blown up in their face in a way that I don't think that they expected. because they're so dim-witted and stupid, right? Like, all they know how to do is destroy. And so they were sort of hoping that they could destroy the place and have it sort of reverberate. And I also do think that there is a general thesis and a general strategy that the Americans often do, which is if they're concerned that another country is going to be able to develop another nation in order to trade with it or have good relations with it, their strategy is to just destroy it, right? And because Ukraine is destroyed, right? Like, it's going to be generation. It's going to be a generation of them rebuilding and finally getting into a place where they might normalize relations. It's going to take them a long time to get back to a place where Russia might somehow benefit from the relationship with Ukraine, right? So it's been successful for the United States from the position of their strategy. But it's so barbaric and like Nazi-esque and it was so obvious this time. It was so obvious this time, right? Yeah, don't forget the Nord Stream incident this well. The U.S. carried out the attack, left Ukraine to deal with the fallout. Yeah, with friends like these, who needs enemies, yeah. Don't the U.S. Army entice you guys with benefits? Like, you're starved and they dangle a piece of meat in front of you and then throw the meat into the barracks? And then the mom talked flippantly about those potential conflicts. Parents honestly think joining the military is just cosplaying Call of Duty. Like, miss, your son is fucking doomed. He is doomed, yeah. Yes, I was once in the Navy because I didn't want to directly fight any wars, but I am partially complicit in all of this, and I am not okay or normal. Yeah, I suspect that the whole process of just getting into that institution and then being in that institution was quite fucked up. Like, these are fucked up institutions. Like, really, when you think about them. Like, think about how fucked up you have to get in order to do the job. Right? Just to do the job. Think about how fucked up your mind has to get. I mean, you probably know more than I do. Yeah, all the Ukrainian flags people were flying on their crucibles on my office are far gone. There was a truck that's always parked on the street here, and I would walk by it every single time I would go to work. And he had a Ukrainian flag flying on the side of it. And the day, yeah, it did go down like this. The day that it came out that the Canadian Parliament had honored a Nazi in front of Zelensky was the day that Ukrainian flag went away. Like, I think people really do underestimate how powerful that moment actually was in Canada, at least. That Canadians saw that shit. Like, everybody I have talked to has at least heard about it. Nobody is saying, what? None of that is happening. Everybody at least knows about it. And nobody is buying into this, like, they didn't know. Like, you gotta be a total fucking clown to believe that idea. Right? You gotta be a total fucking clown to buy into that idea. Yeah. Tell your young relatives to not join the military. It is now a suicide pact. I mean, capitalism is a death cult, right? Like, it's hardly surprising. The military is actually a jobs program for the poor, if you think about it. Yeah, thanks, baked potato. We'll just send the young to war. No problem with that. That's why they did a draft in Vietnam, right? Get the poorest to war. I suspect the U.S. ruling class felt that they could topple Putin and set up Russia as a client state and head the Chinese off of the pass regarding to the One Belt, One Road initiative. Yeah, I think that they, like, absolutely misunderstood the character of Russia. Because Americans are stupid and they don't know anything. Right? They certainly don't care to know anything. I just like to tell the Vanguard that when they flip heaven and earth, the anarchists should not be target for aggression. We mean you no harm and just want to live in peace. Yeah. Like, this year sucks. It seems like every year sucks now, Dragonfruit. Although I'm having a fun little moment. I'm having a roommate move in, so I'm going to have some money for just a moment, I think. Gore Vidal called the United States of Alzheimer, right? Yeah, like you can't... No. History started October 7th. That's when history started. The day that Hamas invaded Israel was the day history began. Right? No historical moment matters at all. Doesn't matter. All history began October 7th. Fun fact, under Biden, trans women age 18 to 25 are still forced to register for the draft despite not being men. That's fun. Yeah, they are going to try to pull a draft off, right? Like, it's likely that that's going to happen. And I think that everybody should dodge it. Straight up. Go to prison instead. Straight up. Be a draft dodger. Do not join the military under any circumstances. Watson writes, I was at a lecture in June in Toronto about the history around the nature of the right wing in Ukraine, and it was disrupted by some UCC fascists who laughed at Ukraine's involvement in the Holocaust. Yeah, dude. Like, the information that's coming out about the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress makes it very, very obvious that this is a fascist organization. Like, it's not just allowing fascists to exist within it, that it itself is a fascist organization. And that we as Canadians have permitted this organization to exist. And not only permitted it to exist, but actually encourage organizations like it to exist. That we let more Nazis into our borders than Jews during World War II. Like, as soon as you recognize those sorts of facts, as soon as you understand where Canada actually stands, right? And where we have always stood. As soon as you hear things like Henry Ford was responsible for giving the Nazis the engines for their tanks and for their machinery. When you hear that, it's very difficult to say anything other than, oh, America helped the Nazis during World War II, right? Or at least the American ruling class did not get in the way of Henry Ford doing so. Henry Ford was awarded the highest civilian honor that a Nazi can give, which is the Iron Cross. Like, Nazis love America. They love America. And there's a reason for it. Yeah, 77% of Americans are unfit to join the military. I don't think that that's going to matter at the end of it all, Dragon Fruit. I think that they're going to round these people up, right? I think that they're, like, the ruling class will often use, and this is true historically, by the way. It's just a historical truism. There's too many young men around, causing too much trouble for everyone. Let's start a war and round these people up and send them off to war. Who cares if they're fit? Like, who cares if they're fit? We're going to give them something to do. We're going to waste a bunch of their time. We're going to kill a bunch of them off, right? And then when they come home, we'll give them a medal, right? A place to eat and shit. And all the piss and vinegar will be taken out of them. It should be noted that the anti-Semitism of the Nazis was not the purpose of that party, just a terrible feature. I mean, they definitely had built within the fabric of their ideology a idea that they were like the superior race, right? So it wasn't specifically anti-Semitism. Like, I think you're right about this. It wasn't specifically anti-Semitism. It was just like everyone was equally inferior to us. Isaac says, I've been hearing in Spanish that Biden has opened the wall to allow immigrants to come in and entice them with the path to legalization if they join the army because Americans are not fit for duty. Dude, just total clown shoes, eh? Just like a total clown shoe. Like, we are a warrior nation that relies on war in order to achieve our goals, but we're going to poison and destroy our own people and make sure that they are completely unfit to serve so that our military cannot actually accomplish any of their objectives. Like, capitalism destroys itself. It's its own grave digger. Their goal was to eradicate Bolshevism, which they associated with the Jews. Yeah. Good to see you, Dave. The USA also used the Nazi scientists for helping them in the Nazi program. Yeah, absolutely. Baked potato, you don't need fat people to fight conventional wars anymore. They can get them to operate drones now. Yeah. But you can only like one of the things we're learning about all this, like the automation of warfare and like drones and all this kind of stuff, you can suppress a population through drone warfare and through aerial warfare and all that. You can suppress them, but you can't really control them, and you can't really control the region. And it's very costly. It's not costly in terms of manpower, but there are other costs, right? Like, drones are not cheap. They are not they're not easy to actually manufacture and get into the field, right? And they're not that reliable. They don't really hit their shit, right? Like there was that one fellow, he went to jail for revealing that like 90%, I forget his name, it was like Daniel Hale, I think that might be right. He revealed that something like 80 to 90% of the time drones didn't hit their target and just hit something else. So it's like, it's just indiscriminate bullshit, right? You can't actually accomplish goals, right? You can't actually get anything done. You need boots on the ground. That's why with this Gaza Strip stuff, when the Israelis are talking about actually getting boots on the ground, right? When they're actually talking about getting boots on the ground, that's how you know they're actually serious. Because as soon as you put boots on the ground, now you're talking. Now you're talking about something serious. Watson says, okay, the bigotry inherent in fascism is not the purpose of fascism, if the sick and necessary division to give fascism legitimacy. Watson, what would you describe as the purpose of fascism? Just for clarity's sake. I'm interested to hear your answer. Dragonfruit. There was an article saying young men are either too stoned, mentally ill, or overweight to be able to serve. Yeah, dude, you guys are talking about it so much, let's just bring up the article. Let's just do it. Right? 77% of Americans are unfit to serve in the military. I saw this article. From the military... here we go. American Military News. Right? No thanks. 77% of young Americans, too fat, mentally ill, on drugs, and more to join military. Pentagon study finds. A Pentagon study revealed that 77% of young Americans do not qualify for military service without a waiver due to being overweight, drug use, or mental or physical problems. When considering youth disqualified for one reason alone, the most prevalent disqualification rates are overweight, 11%, drug and alcohol abuse, 8%, and medical physical health, 7%. The Pentagon's 2020 Qualified Military Available Study of Americans between the ages of 17 and 24 read. Several key findings were noted in the summary of the report. For example, most ineligible youth, 44%, are disqualified for multiple reasons, rather than in only one area. Among those ineligible for only one reason, being overweight was the highest disqualification at 11%. Drug use, 8%, medical physical only, 7%, and mental health only, 4%, were other leading categories found in the study. The largest increase in disqualifications estimate observed between 2013 and 20 were for mental health and overweight conditions. Another key finding was that the proportion of youth, both eligible and not currently enrolled in college, was only 12%. The concerns over the shrinking pool of potential recruits has grown in recent years. Major Charlie Diaz, the Department of Defense spokesman, stated that the study confirmed the challenges of recruiting new military members. There are many factors that we are navigating through, such as the fact that youth are more disconnected and disinterested compared to previous generations. Yeah, more disconnected and disinterested with a psychopathic military that's destroying everybody overseas for no fucking reason. Like, it's easier to recruit people when they're convinced that you're doing things for good, as opposed to obviously evil psychopaths, right? Like, obviously evil. Anybody actually genuinely think that the American military is a force for good in the world? Like, the declining veteran population and shrinking military footprint has contributed to a market that is unfamiliar with military service, resulting in an over-reliance of military stereotypes. In September, Pentagon leaders sounded the alarm on its recruiting challenges. The department anticipates we will collectively miss our recruiting mission, despite addressing more than 170,000 remarkable young men and women in the fiscal year that ended September 30th. Stephanie Miller, Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Military Personnel Policy, told the Senate Armed Services Personnel Subcommittee, "This constitutes an unprecedented mission gap and is reason for concern." You know what they'll do? They'll call it a recruitment emergency, and then they'll spend $300 billion to confront the recruitment emergency while the planet burns down. Huh? That seems like America, right? We're going to spend $1 trillion on this recruitment emergency to whip the youth of America into shape to go to war so that they can watch their children die. Among the concerns expressed by lawmakers is the COVID-19 vaccine mandate that was only recently ended for the U.S. military. New York Representative Elise Stefanik pushed for an end to the mandate in her support of December's National Defense Authorization Act. Our country must never fall behind in providing for a strong national defense, which is why I am proud to bring an end to the Biden administration's authoritarian COVID vaccine mandate on our servicemen and women that has weakened our military recruitment and impaired our military ranks. Like, do these people not hear themselves? Do you think? Do you just think they don't actually hear or know what they look like to the rest of us? You know? I guess they just keep hearing "thank you for your service" so much. Right? Like, just like, and this is a serious one. This will get seriously looked at, right? People will be real serious about this one. It's gonna be like, "Oh my God, our recruitment. We gotta make sure that we solve this problem." What? You can't breathe the air? Bootstraps. Stop being a wuss, you wussy. So the enemy could just shoot COVID at all the unvaccinated U.S. soldiers? Yeah. And meanwhile, China's military is stronger than ever. I do want to tell you guys something about all this COVID stuff. There is a lady that actually is a regular at my work. Her son works for her son works for the company that I work with. And she got talking to me about all this COVID stuff, and she gave me this website, Public Health and Medical Professionals for Transparency. She is convinced that the COVID vaccine was only 1% effective, and that this was all admitted in court documents that are on this website that I have not had the opportunity to go through, but that I am going to go through. That these are the court documents that Pfizer and Moderna wanted to keep buried. They wanted to bury it for like 50 years, maybe even longer than that, and a judge wouldn't let them. So here's the documents. I'm going to go through them and verify whether or not that claim is true. Wouldn't that be fucked up? Huh? Wouldn't that be fucked up? All these mandates and all this kind of stuff. Turns out the vaccine is only 1% effective. Like, so barely. Like, just like in the most technical way possible. Wonka, 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 wonka. And meanwhile, China's military is stronger than ever. like, you know why, right? It's because China understands that the United States is a credible threat, and so they actually train their children, right? See, I do think that the major difference between the United States and China is that China seems to actually give a shit about its own kids. Like, it's actually interested in training a generation of people to be strong and good, you know? It's actually interested in building a society that is good and strong and stable. It's actually interested in that. Like, seems like the United States stopped caring about that if it ever did. If we're going to live within the context of an imperialist settler colonial system, I think trans people should enjoy the benefits of imperialism and settler colonialism without having to pay the costs, meaning they should be exempt from the military. I mean, we could just not live in an imperialist settler colonial system, huh? We could just stop that. We could just be like, why are we going to war with everybody all of the time? What is that? Like, what is that, really? Like, it seems like very, like, little kid. Seems very, like fragile. Like, we're not making any friends. You know what I mean? Like, we're not making any friends at all. We're just blowing everybody up, alienating everybody. You know who I really love listening to these days anytime I get a chance? I love listening to the ambassadors that come out of India. Because these guys are just laying it right out. They're just straight up like, yeah, our country was great. Then the British showed up and they fucked everything up for us. Right? And like straight up saying things like, I don't know why you think we should listen to you. Like, who cares what you think? like you guys literally destroyed our country. Like, why should we give two shits what you think about any subject, let alone this one? You know, it's so great. Well, Pfizer is run by the same people you're railing against in the Middle East. Yeah, I know, right? Like, my position on the vaccine stuff was always, I think it's rational and reasonable to be skeptical of corporations and the government, right? I think that it's completely reasonable. That's not the people who are saying I don't trust these guys. I think that's a rational and reasonable position to take. And so when I went and got the vaccine, I was listening to the doctors and the nurses. Those are the people, the frontline workers. Those were the people who I was listening to. And so I took it as an article of solidarity with other workers to get the vaccine and move forward with that. But as we're moving forward, I think that there could be, and I've always thought this, that it's perfectly legitimate, and it's actually perfectly possible that there was some fucked up shit with this vaccine. It's completely within the realm of possibility. And so what I have always been waiting for, and what I've always been asking for, because it's a very complex and big issue. So I need to see a smoking gun. And if there is something fucky with these vaccines, and if there is something going on with it, if there is something like that, I believe it will surface, right? That there will be a smoking gun. And I've got somebody telling me that there's a potential smoking gun here. So I'm going to look into it. But I've never been like, vaccines work, just get your vaccine. Like, should the government have mandated vaccines? Was a government mandate necessary? Did we actually need a government mandate? Was it important that we actually did that? Right? So mandates, I was always a bit like, seems a bit heavy-handed, seems a bit much, don't you feel? Like, I can understand why people would take the position that vaccines being mandated for healthcare professionals makes a type of sense. These are people that are regularly interacting with people who are infected, that every bit of defense, even if it did end up being the case that the vaccine is only 1% effective, well, okay, well, that's 1% better than you had before, right? And so if you're a doctor or a nurse and you're in the midst of this pandemic, this period of uncertainty, okay, okay, sure, right? But if you're like a trucker, right? You're just like a dude in the cab of a truck going around the country alone by yourself for the most part. What the fuck are you talking about? Mandate? Like, I wasn't mandated. I wasn't mandated to get a vaccine, and I interact with the public way more than some trucker. What are you talking about? Right? People working at McDonald's didn't have to get a mandated vaccine. Or what are you talking about? What are you talking about with that? Like, it's the weirdest shit in the world. Right? And I mean, so I think that there is an element of overreaction. I think that is part of it for sure. But I also do think that, like, these companies knew that it was their time to make money. Bill Gates said as much, right? Bill Gates said as much. And that we have to, and so they have the incentives are in the right place. You know what I mean? The incentives are in the right place. Like, if you follow the money and you think about how these corporations are and what they do and what their motives are, right? It makes sense that they would lie to us, right? They've done it before, right? Like, they lied to us about smoking. They're lying to us about climate change, right? They lie to us about big, serious things where millions of people die. There are definitely weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, right? So they lie to us all the time. I don't know why there is this general narrative that seems to exist in the society where they're for sure telling us 100% of the truth about the vaccine. Like, where suddenly now it's impossible that they would just lie their faces off to us. But again, I need a smoking gun. I need to see something real and tangible and serious. Because I've seen enough evidence to show that just recently there was a Globe and Mail article where they were just like, no, we did a pretty big study and there were no vaccine deaths, like no excess vaccine deaths or things like this. Right? But again, you could make the argument that, well, that's just the system protecting itself, isn't it? So it's a dense and it's a difficult subject that I can only really speculate on right now. Getting the untested vaccine was an overreaction, and reacting to the effectiveness is also an overreaction. They'll always produce a smoking gun when one is demanded. No. Like, when I'm talking about smoking guns, I'm talking about like something serious, right? Like we've got a smoking gun right in front of us. Like, this is a smoking gun, right? Like, this is literally the Israelis' own plan to ethnically cleanse Gaza. This is their own documents, their own stated position. Like, this is a smoking gun. In fact, yeah. Like, when I'm talking about smoking guns, here it is. Like, right in front of your face. And these, when it comes to world events and when it comes to big moments, like, that's why I don't really buy into the 9/11 truth thing, right? Like the 9/11 conspiracy theory. Because, like, an event like that usually will have a smoking gun, right? It's just you're not going to see, like, these guys are not that smart, right? They're not that good at their job. They're not gods or something. They don't have this, like, impossible to defeat, like, you can never destroy our incredible, like, no, they're boobs mainly. They're just dumbasses for the most part. So the idea that they would actually manage to orchestrate this, like, inside job to actually get this thing done and then get away with it, you know, I'm going to need to see a smoking gun. And usually one does materialize. There's usually a smoking gun. Somebody comes out, there's a whistleblower, right? Something more serious manifests itself. And there's a lot of, like, kind of hearsay and like interesting things, and people have interesting positions, just like the JFK assassination. But like, I just think that there's got to be something more significant and more serious about. It just seems very unlikely that George Bush and Dick Cheney and Rumsfeld would plan this, and that like literally nobody else would know about it. October 7th and 9/11 are very similar. Both involved ignoring credible threats of attacks to justify a response. I've heard this argument about the Hamas invasion into Israel. I actually think that the Hamas invasion into Israel, like, I think they knew that there was an attack coming, but anytime I hear about the attack and the nature of it from Hamas, which they don't give you details, they don't tell you about it, but like, it sounds to me like they were pretty creative. They were using hang gliders and shit. Like, that when you have a lot of power, that comes with a great deal of arrogance, right? And I think that this plays with 9/11 as well. That when you have a lot of power, you end up being arrogant. And there is a lot of arrogance that happens. And so so events can kind of fly under your radar and can occur that you don't ever hear about the ones that were prevented. You don't ever hear about the attacks and the attempts that were prevented, right? Like that doesn't actually happen. But you do hear about the ones that hit, right? Like, those are the ones you hear about. And like, our assumption is just like, oh, they tried once and it worked once. It's like, no, they tried like 20 times, and this is the one that got through. And it got through because the power structure is arrogant and not particularly creative or intelligent or clever, right? Like, they don't really think about how people might thwart their systems or might actually come at them. They just, shock and awe is mainly how the Americans work, right? They just go in with big firepower and overwhelm the enemy with their superior technology. So if you're the least bit clever or resourceful, then you can do things. And I think that that's mainly probably what happened with Hamas, is that they just were clever and resourceful, and they came in a way, they didn't come in at a time when the IDF didn't expect them. They came in such a way that the IDF didn't expect them. You know? Like, it's like hang gliders. Like, what the hell? That's pretty wild. Yeah. Let's be honest, the whole point of abusing the Palestinians is to incite them to violence. Then the abuser has cover to do what they want. Yeah. And like, that's why I don't really buy I don't buy the idea of them creating like a false flag or ignoring credible, because they don't need a reason. They never need a reason. They've never needed a reason. They don't need a justification. I think that's something that people kind of misunderstand about the situation, right? And it's especially true with the United States now too. Like, they don't need a reason. They're doing it because they want to, right? That if they wanted to go in and bomb the shit out of the place, well, they've done that, and they will do that. They'll continue to do that, right? And they put the Gazans in a state of misery, right? And so they don't need to, like, plan an attack or plan a moment. You know what I mean? Like, they just know that one will manifest. They know that it'll happen. Like, they don't need to plot in this way, in the way that is being suggested. Like, they just keep maintaining their open air prison and suppressing the people of Gaza and steadily cleansing them, steadily. And they just know that eventually there'll be a moment when Hamas strikes, and then they'll strike back. That's how it's always been. Yeah, this is actually not a terrible way of looking at it, Slurp, and something I'm sort of interested is that they don't need the justification for others, they need it for themselves. Yeah, that's not a terrible way of looking at it. Like, that they need to whip themselves into that kind of a frenzy, right? All this Gaza could be a new Singapore. That's the first time I've ever heard about that one. Gaza could be a new Singapore. Oh, someone's talking. I struck a nerve with the COVID talk. I know very little people that actually fell ill, but government has built huge hospitals dedicated strictly to the infection. Some of my friends say they were ill and sometimes even heard about people died, 2 or 3 cases. None actually cared much about that here, as we actually have immunity to the infection to some degree. Lots of people here get over the virus every year, lots of different versions of the coronavirus long before 2019. Okay. I don't know what you're really like. Yeah, I'm just getting too damn tired. I can't talk. I shouldn't have brought up the vaccines, honestly. I think I'm going to end it a little bit early, guys, because I woke up at 6:30 this morning, so I think I'm going to call it. Always a pleasure. Always remember, each and every one of you is a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are doing everything to make sure you don't realize it. And you just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.